All right. I believe we've started. Call this regular business meeting of the Loveland Board of Education to order at 6 p.m. and ask our treasurer, Mr. Giuffre, for a roll call.
Mr. Daugherty.
Here.
Reverend Eilert.
Here.
Dr. Lorenz.
Here.
Dr. Schwestenow.
Here.
Mrs. Washburn.
Here. All board members are present. Here we are in the Intermediate Middle School Media Center. We are conducting the meeting in person. We are recording the meeting. We are live streaming the meeting. And so we welcome all of our guests. The first item on our agenda is to adopt our agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda? Mr. Doherty moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Reverend Eilert seconded. I don't believe there has been any change on the agenda published for you. It is available on board docs for those of you who are looking online. It's available here in paper copy for those of you who are here in the audience with us. Any questions or discussion about the agenda? Seeing none, Mr. Giuffre, can we vote on that?
Mr. Daugherty.
Yes.
Reverend Eilert.
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz.
Yes.
Dr. Schwestenow.
Yes.
And Mrs. Washburn.
Yes. Motion carried. The first item for the board to approve is to approve the October 2022 regular session minutes. And I will move that we approve those minutes.
Second.
Mr. Doherty seconded. Are there any questions, additions, corrections to those minutes? Seeing none, can we vote on that?
Dr. Lorenz.
Yes.
Mr. Daugherty.
Yes.
Reverend Eilert.
Yes.
Dr. Schwestenow.
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes. Those minutes are approved. Motion carried. I would like to welcome all of our guests here in the audience. I don't know that those who are watching online can see guests in the audience, but we do have some. We have our administrators all in a row back there. It's nice to have them with us. We have our student reps with us. I'd like to welcome you all to the meeting, and I would ask you to stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We now move to the hearing of the public session. Many of you are familiar with this section of our meeting. We ask folks to give their name, address, and when it's appropriate, state any group affiliation. Each speaker has 3 minutes to address any particular item. If several people wish to speak, each person has 3 minutes until the time of 30 minutes. No person may speak twice until all those who desire to speak had the opportunity. So, Mr. Giuffre, how many folks do we have?
I believe we have 5, and I hope they're in order. I didn't put them in order, but the order they're in is.
The order they're in is what we got.
Yes.
Okay.
Numbered them on the top.
Oh, well, then they're in order. Thank you.
And I will just check to be sure in case you needed to sign in on a sign-in sheet. So I just want to make sure we're okay. All right, Mr. Giuffre, I'll have you.
First is Marcia Newman.
Hi, I'm Marcia Newman. First off, I'd like to thank Loveland voters, all of Loveland voters. You showed up. Unofficially, almost 14,000 of you approved or defeated at least the bulk of Loveland. That was a great turnout. This is a far cry from the 3,185 voters, just 18% of registered voters who approved the last permanent levy for all Loveland property owners. A couple things on transparency. There's been much talk since June about the district budget. There are probably more residents tuned in tonight's board meeting. The semi-annual state-required 5-year forecast is a line item on the agenda, yet it is not attached. It has been the center stage of conversation for 6 months, but concerned, engaged Loveland residents are unable to view it along with the presentation vote tonight. Why not? Another transparency topic. How many teachers does Loveland School District have? Last month, administrators reported 202 and 253.5 FTE teachers for the 2021 school year.
Thank you.
Leslie Hodge.
Good evening. I told Eric every time I get up here, I feel like I'm addressing the gods of Olympus. You should have some Doric columns and an Olympic flame or something. I'm here because, and I do get up and speak because I speak for a lot of people who never get and stand and address you and say the things I'm going to say. When you challenge the orthodoxy of the Temple of Modern Schooling, its loudest proponents will brand you as who just don't care about kids or hardworking teachers or home values, who are haters, emanating lies, propaganda, and misinformation, and who foment division. This vilification has been directed at the half of our community who voted against the recent levy and does not elevate the cause or image of the school or our greater community. Some levy supporters have even gone so far as to invoke the Son of God, claiming that Jesus himself would have voted for this levy, which is ironic since the Supreme Court kicked God out of public education in 1962. The reality is we are in a civil war. If success to you is putting a levy on the ballot until you win by 1 vote or 100, it will be a Pyrrhic victory if the community destroys itself in the process. You may win a battle, but the war goes on. We all want a good, solid education for our children, but we are in this war because we are unable to agree on what education should be and whether you are even good stewards of the millions you receive in taxpayer revenue. To quote a local architect, we have a bridge failure, and we find ourselves on separate shores. If we can't count on the state to change or fix the funding model, how will we resolve this dilemma? Forcing levies on the community every 3 to 5 years is not sustainable, as you are running out of goodwill and other people's ability to afford higher and higher property taxes. Blaming others for the bridge failure isn't productive. We have a problem, but it only makes things worse if we continually trudge down the same path of putting levies on the ballot and letting the public duke it out, instead of trying something different or making a new decision. We are in difficult economic times, which may continue. We all must tighten our belt, and some consideration must be given to the greater community rather than disregarding those with differing opinions or concerns. There has never been honest, two-way, open conversation. Instead, the district does control the narrative or talks at the community, or tosses the public a milk bone where we get 3 minutes to talk at you in a board meeting. There is a Korean saying that the problems in life can be fixed with money. Those that can be fixed with money are the. But in our community, we now have the kinds of problems like dehumanizing each other that are harder and take longer to repair. I believe we can rebuild the bridge if there is a will to do so. My question is, when can we have the greater conversation? Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's Rick Vanderhaar.
Good evening. My name is Rick Vonderhaar. I live at 9240 Sioux Place Circle. Been a resident of Loveland for 32 years now. I'm also a member of the Sims Township Finance Committee. And I have 2 financial questions. First question is, why wasn't the nearly $500,000 LCSD will receive from Township from the Fields Erdel TIF, not included in the 2023 budget line item. $500,000 almost, not included. Second question is, how much excess cash in the school district was invested with meter last year? And what was the return in dollars? And just for a reference, and I know you've got more than a couple $1 million in excess cash. As a reference, in Sims Township, with $8.2 million invested with meter, we're going to get $120,000 in cash this year. We're projected to get nearly $150,000 next year. Why wasn't your excess cash invested in meter to get that kind of return? Because I know you need the money and you could use it. Somebody is not being fiduciarily responsible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dave Shoemaker.
Good evening. I'm Dave Shoemaker. I live at 10098 Shelburne Drive. My house is very similar to Marcia's.
To what?
Washburn.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I think your house or nothing to do with talking about today. Same neighborhood. Anyway, I've been wanting to give this to you for some time. What this is the Loveland teacher pay scale, but it's oriented or arranged or sorted from lowest pay to highest pay. And if you look at the columns, you'll see as salaries to the left, years of experience in education step, base salary, experience entitlement pay, and education entitlement pay. And so it gives you an idea of the relative value of the various education and experience levels that you have there. What I want to point out in my first 3 minutes is that if you look at the orange, I'm sorry, blue, let's look at the blue. The blue is all zero experience entitlement pay. Okay, now this is just education level now. So you'll see that for the, you look, read across, like if you look at, I have like the columns later, you know, the rows label, 1, 2, 3, so on. You look at the BA for 1 year experience. There I am experience. I don't want to do experience first. I'm sorry. Look at 3, education. Okay, you'll see 3 is the BA 150, is the first education step. You look to the right, you'll see it's $2,738 or 6.2% effect of the base salary. Look down below to the next level, which is a master's. It's $5,079 or 11.5%. You look down further, you'll see the master's plus 10 semesters. It's $7,288 or 16.5%. And you go down to the next one, 28 semesters for a master's is $9,496 or 21.5%. And finally, master's plus 30 is $12,036, $27.25%. Now, the question I have is it takes about, I would say, 20, at least 20 hours, semester hours of additional work to go from a BA to a BA 150.
30 seconds.
Okay. I'll come back. 30 seconds or 3 minutes?
Oh. You're okay, just
My
keep going.
hearing aids, I
Fine.
have water.
Just keep going.
Okay, so anyway, so it's, what I said, 20 hours to go from a BA to a master's, 2025. Okay, it takes probably another 15, if you do it right, say another 15 to go to a master's. So let's say 30 to 40. Just let me finish this one point here. If you look to go from a master's to a master's plus 30, that's 30 semester hours, which is about equivalent, but a little less. Look at the difference in the percent. Okay, 11.5% to go from a BA to a master's, and you got 15.75% to go from a master's to a master's plus 30. Think on that, and I'll be back.
LJ Cecil.
Hello. I'm LJ Cecil, and I live on Pheasant Woods Court. And I'm not going to give you numbers and statistics. I'm going to tell you, this is the third time a levy has not passed. Hopefully, the board listens. I don't want us to continue to fight with each other. I don't want a battle. What I want is for everybody to get together and go talk to the state. To that end, the voice page on the web, www.lovelandvoice.com, has set up a page of state changes. I invite every one of you to send an email to lovelandvoice@gmail.com with any ideas you think need to be added on there. This is a discussion. That's just bullet points to get us started. I challenge Mr. Broadwater to speak to every superintendent out there, and let's get a serious conversation. I know I'm reaching out to all kinds of people on Nextdoor, having levies in their district, and saying, let's get this done. It's not going to be done overnight, but I can be a real pain in the butt, and I will chase it. And I've done lobbying in the state. So work with me. Work with our city. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no more. We're 13 minutes into our 30. If you would like to bring Mr. Shoemaker back.
All right with the board to bring Mr. Shoemaker back?
Yes.
Thank you.
For an additional 3 minutes.
I think you might find this helpful. Anyway, point being is there's a weighted advantage to the masters, and that's money. And frankly, I don't understand any of this as far as why they're different, especially the masters. Three semester is more money than the masters plus 20 or 10. Those are like 5%, 5%. Masters plus 30 is more than that. I don't get it. I can't believe you can do things that finely, but it is what it is. All I'm saying is you ought to try to make those more equivalent. I came up with a thing like 4% for the masters. Each of the masters would be 4% increases, which would be equivalent to what in hours, what the VA to the master. Anyway, moving on to the experience. The experience for the BA and the BA 150 is both $2,041 for 4.6% of the base salary. Notice all the masters are the same, $2,297 for 5.2%. Why on earth would you have a different experience pay for bachelor's versus a master's? I cannot understand that at all. You've just given money for the education training outside the classroom. Now we're going inside the classroom, and you're saying that a bachelor's teacher is less of value to the community than a master's teacher is. You gotta let all the parents know that. They all want to have master's teachers because there must be a difference in the teaching. Anyway, that's number 2. Oh, turn to the last page 3, please. Let's look at 30 years, just to emphasize that. You look at 30 years, go down to like row number 106. This is 30 years for a bachelor's degree. You get no experience, you get no education on that, but the master, you'll get experience entitlement of $39,728. You're down to the BA 150, it's the same, $39,728. Turn the page to the masters. Experience.
45 seconds.
The masters get $43,637, about $5,000 more. I got a little more to say, but if that's all you're giving me, that's all I'll take.
How much more do you have to?
Oh, I just want to point out one other observation I found. And this is probably the one that really, I don't understand this at all. I don't think any of this was done by local. I think this is union type of pay scales because someone had to really think this through. Your base salary, of course, is involved in all these entitlement pays, experience and the education. Now, if the base salary would remain constant over the years, then this would be fine, other than what I just said. But it changes. So what happens now is you inflate every one of the things I just talked about. So now, every year, that education pay is going to go up with inflation. Even though maybe it was 20 years ago they got the master's. They're getting more and more money every year for that. And I'm sorry, I don't see the substantiation of that at all. Same with experience. They get inflated every year because you have to go to percent of the base salary, and that's changing. It's changed every year since 1996, except for 2013 until right now. Anyway, just trying to help. I think if you did this, it would be great. I think you'd have a better sustainable, fair pay schedule. I don't know how the BA teachers would put up with this. I don't think they know about all this. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. That is all.
All right, that ends the hearing of the public time.
Well,
Dr.
and I just-
Swarchenau looks like he
Yeah,
has something
I
to
wanted
add.
to pitch in. I always appreciate, I know it's called hearing of the public and it's not a two-way street for conversation. But without hearing the public, without hearing the concerns, it's very hard for us to do as good of a job as we can. So I always appreciate, as Leslie said, the people who take the time to stand up and talk about things that they see are problems. So thank you all.
Eric, if I could add to that, I think, we sit here and want to engage with you. A few of us in this room, for example, on the teacher contract, spent the better part of the year in negotiations. And it's an enormously difficult, enormously complex process. I would say that I appreciate your input. I have to be honest and say I don't understand it. I'd like you to explain this to me a little bit better when we're not in the formal part of the meeting. But there's no easy process to have a back and forth environment. And sometimes comments and points are made that are really worthy of having some discussions. So I think you find times like this where we do have a little unofficial engagement going on. So we do appreciate it. More to come is what I'm trying to say.
All right, anything else? All right, we move on to the section titled Administrative Reports. Once again, those reports are available on board docs for all to see. They are provided for board members to help them be ready for the actions that they take in the board meeting, and can be referenced at particular times for resolution when things are unless I see questions on that, we'll move to the board president report. I have a short report. Remember that our next meeting is December 10th. That was a special meeting that we've called, December 12 in the morning. It is a meeting open to the public. There is no agenda proposed, no action proposed. It is a time for board discussion, talking about 2023 calendar, 2023 organization of the board, appointees that the board will need to make in 2023. There'll be some time to talk about particularly policies relating to processes, recordings, minutes, bylaws, time for us to review. We are doing a policy review, so it would be time for us to talk about those. And I suspect that we need a little bit of time to talk about financial matters. Then added that to the agenda. Again, no resolution projected for that meeting. The board has had a,
Before we go,
yes,
is there a reason why we put that on? Since often when we do a retreat setting for different boards and so forth, it's not it's when you're going away somewhere, but since it's a public meeting or, the public's invited to it anyway, is there a reason not to simply do that on the Tuesday evening, like our regular scheduled time? And,
I
was thinking of
simply, I
Saturdays
asked,
in December, and I know we had said that was okay, but
Are you
rethinking that and wondering,
Saturday morning.
yeah, yeah. I mean, our usual timeframe, it's not going to really be a retreat. Can't have a retreat. We don't do retreats in a public
Kathy
meeting
can
setting,
answer this
so.
question, but my anticipation is that it would be enough extra time, that it was a lot to add on to a regular meeting. That was how I understood it.
I didn't say extra time. I saw it as a more relaxed retreat type. Go on retreat and a time to start with some coffee or something and sit and talk. But I did give dates of the Tuesday nights, and the input that I got from superintendent, treasurer, and 5 board members was that the time that best met folks' needs was that Saturday morning.
I've got it marked out. I just as thought more about it.
Yeah.
So you're just asking, move Saturday to Tuesday.
Yeah, just because it's going to be a public meeting like all of our other public, because of the nature of, we meet, so.
I thought we had some conflict with Tuesday that moved us off that day, but maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know of any, again, I presented a couple of different dates to the board, and that's the date that I heard back from.
Yeah, I'm
Folks
sorry
that-
to disrupt, but anyway, that was just my, we want to keep it, everyone's comfortable with the 10th, we keep it on the 10th. I got it blocked out.
The
But-
other suggestion that I would make is it's a little less tiring to do something on a morning like that than it is to do a day of work and start at 6 o'clock and maybe try to block out 3 or 4 hours for discussion. So that was another thought for the Saturday morning.
I'm ambivalent on it. I Tuesday evening, if Tuesday evening, I do think that it does turn into, another 4 or 5 hour meeting. I know my brain's better early in the morning than it is late at night. So that's just an input. I don't know.
I'm always good. Said I'm always good.
If we're thinking it's 4 to 5 hours, that is a factor too, obviously.
I had said that perhaps we would meet and be out of here by noon.
We'd love to have everybody join us.
I was going to bring
I
donuts.
pushed for 6 a.m.
I'm not bringing donuts at 6 a.m.
Jonathan, as long as you don't have a strong feeling about it, let's just keep it on that.
Do you have a strong feeling?
No, it's a Saturday in December. There are only so many of those, but I've got it blocked out, so I can.
There's only so many Tuesday evenings in December.
True.
I share. I do it too, but I know what you're saying. It's not a retreat where we're doing stuff and we're.
Well, it is in fact a retreat setting as opposed to a regular board meeting. Not doing resolution. We are doing it as a retreat, although we don't wish to spend the money to go somewhere for a retreat or make people come, make people travel to a meeting as a retreat. But that was the idea.
I
So,
said it a little bit differently. The idea is not to, sorry. I understand we're having some mic problems, by the way. The idea was no agenda, but, formal agenda per se, clearly no business, but to have very open, kind of wide-ranging conversation. So a little different than our normal meeting. So somebody needs to push this, if you push it hard, if you want to change it, and then we can take a vote and make a decision and move on, I guess.
Sounds to me pretty similar to a normal meeting without resolutions. Right?
well, again, the only thing that I added to it, talk about financial. I had suggested that it was a time for board to talk about board governance, working together. So that is very different from a regular meeting. It's, again, a chance for
No
a conversation.
administrator reports. Mike
Right.
doesn't have to present to us.
Right, it's a chance for a
The students
conversation
don't
with
have
the
to be
board.
there.
They want to come at 6 a.m.
I guess I'm just having a hard time differentiating still what, if, clearly different than our business meeting. Our work sessions sound like essentially the same thing to me. It's a time to talk about whatever topics we need to talk about. So I thought what the nature of the work sessions were too. That differentiates them from the business.
So again, I would just say, I mean, if it's something important, go ahead and push for it. I'm ambivalent. You know, I'm up at 5, I'm up at midnight, it doesn't matter to me. So,
Yeah.
do it any way we want to do it.
I'm the same way.
I'm not hearing a motion, but
Yeah, I guess my biggest concern now is if we're going to talking 4 to 5 hours worth, if we have 4 to 5 hours worth of discussion items to plow through, then it's probably not conducive to 6 o'clock meeting. If we have, you know, 2 to 3 hours, then I think we accomplish that.
If I had my way, it's only gonna be like an hour and a half. But again, all kidding aside, I blocked out the time on a Saturday morning. I can do the time on a Tuesday evening. Ambivalence is the nature of the game. And if you feel like it's important to do it versus a Saturday for the other things in your life, that's totally fine. But I would say that if that is a feeling, just make a motion and then we can. And Kathy, do you have any strong feelings that we even? I understand where you're coming from, and I agree that I like the idea of coffee and donut.
I felt that it was a time when we could block out a time, and if we were able to spend 4 hours, it made sense to do it on a Saturday morning rather than to try and do something and have someone say at 8:30 or 9 o'clock, you know, I've really had enough of this meeting, stop. And, you know, so that was the reason for suggesting a Saturday morning. But again, I suggested several times, this is the one that most folks said they wanted to do, so that's why it was scheduled.
So, and if 4 hours is the, what you're thinking, we've got that many things to talk about, then.
Well, how much time did we just spend?
Yeah, exactly. Right. I don't want to keep belaboring
Okay,
it now.
sorry, that
Sorry.
wasn't fun. I apologize, but, all right.
This
so-
is an
know this
example of
sound-
how we don't talk in private.
I know this, yeah, I know this sounds ridiculous to people, but this is government. Open government is a requirement of the law, and we can't just to go meet in a coffee shop someplace and have a meeting. It would be against the law to do that. So this is part of the stuff that makes doing the business crazy and difficult. Be aware. Anybody who wants to run for the board, be aware. It's a whole different way of doing things.
Okay, so that was the first line, President report. Concerning communication since the last meeting, there was at first a fairly small amount. Board received costume wearing at LPS and LES, and that was handled at the building level. We received communication regarding the recording of the October meeting. By now, anyone who has tried to look at that recording of the October meeting realized that it took a lot of work, thanks to Adam and to all of those in the department who worked to get those recordings put together, and also to try to get to the root of the issues for the recording as we're going forward. Also, though, we have received in the past few days a couple of emails, tax levies, received some input asking for consideration for a time-limited levy, also consideration for earned income tax or straight income tax. We received an open letter from Loveland Voice asking that it be included in the minutes. I know that we have in the policy, because we had during COVID, the policy that people could do so via email. That's a little different than receiving a letter and asking it to be included in the minutes. So I'm board members that letter be included in the minutes of this meeting.
May I say, what I typically do with the board's comments is make a link in the minutes to it.
Okay, I'm just making sure that the board is in agreement for the Loveland Voice letter that we received
Right.
to be included in the minutes.
Would the alternative be somebody to stand up and read it out loud so that it'll be included in the minutes?
Or simply to note that the board has received it and read it. It is a letter to the board. It is an open letter. I mean, I'm fine
So
with
is
putting
there-
it in the minutes. I'm just letting the board know the request was made to put it in the minutes, and I would prefer not to make a unilateral decision.
Well,
Rob
it-
is
put that-
simply saying it would be noted at this point in the, agenda that there's a reference to link to the document.
Yeah.
In the minutes.
Yeah,
It
so
wouldn't be
I-
a part of our minutes from our
Right.
minutes.
Right, just like our comments are.
Right.
So I mean, from where I stand, if in this case, a PAC has asked to have an open letter to the board included in the minutes, I have no problem with that.
And I'm just trying to think through what are future problems that we make now, and I don't really see any. If we get 5,000 requests to add letters to the minutes, it's all on the link on the.
Right.
Again, so people understand, there are times that we get hundreds, literally hundreds of emails, and to physically include each and every one of them, Rob or part of his staff has to connect. So there is some work involved in it, but let me say, I'm fine with this on the basis that we're not setting a precedent by doing it. I think this is kind of a unique, big deal for the community. So let the information be out there and be available to people. It's fine.
I tend to agree with what Kevin said. I think it should, and I appreciate that you including us in the conversation. I think it should be a discussion that we.
I think that we need to look at the policy that we have. Again, the policy that we have came out of COVID and the fact that people could not come to a meeting to speak. And so instead of signing up to speak in a Zoom meeting, they were able to send a file that could be included as part of the public participation. This is slightly different than that. And so I just want to be sure that we were doing it correctly.
Can I just maybe make a resolution to allow that to be entered into the minutes and treat this as a one-off and move on? Does that work?
Yeah, you can certainly do it. I guess I'm not clear why we would.
Just in case it happens to be in conflict with policy.
Then you need to make a motion to amend the agenda to include a motion.
Okay, before I get to that, are we amenable to just including it?
Yes.
Are we amenable?
Yep.
Jonathan?
Okay.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yep.
Can we just do that and move on then?
Yes. Okay.
I'm good with that.
So that's communication. The other communication that I did receive, I received a question from a fellow board member about the trailer at LECC. And there is a report in the business office report concerning the trailer. And just in a nutshell, that trailer did go into service. And then there were HVAC issues that were caused, I understand, by a raccoon. And those have been ameliorated. And I believe the trailer is now in service. But again, that report is in the business office report of the meeting. But I did, again, have a question about it, so I got the information about it. One other item that I wanted to mention is that I am a board member on the retirees. And at each meeting, we have a report from STRS and OPERS, the State Employee Retirement Systems. There's a lot of publicity currently, especially about STRS and the health of the fund. I can provide individual reports if you would like, but I do suggest that it might be worthwhile to consult the STRS website. That's strs.org. On that site, you can even register to listen to the board meeting virtually this Thursday. Outside of that conversation about how the S fund is doing financially, I will note that the STRS health insurance plan is doing quite well, reducing premiums this year because of the history that they had this past year, even providing a rebate to members, quite different than the 17.9% increase in health care premiums this year for the Great Oaks system. So just a note on healthcare premiums. Final note of my report is that for the past 3 months, the board has worked to evaluation of his goals. With this report today, the evaluation form will be released to the public. I believe that will be attached to the minutes tomorrow. The board has determined that the work Mr. Broadwater has done in the past year has been much more than satisfactory, and this is documented in that evaluation form. During the course of the evaluations, 2 issues within the superintendent contract were noted. The first is that the date specified in the contract for notice for intent to renew was inadvertently set a year early. So this report shall serve as written notice that will be considered in early 2023 and thus satisfies that clause in the contract. The second issue that arose out of the consideration of the contract concerns noting unintended financial consequences for Mr. Broadwater regarding health insurance. The board does plan to make an adjustment to the annuity reference in the contract to help alleviate these consequences for Mr. Broadwater. Finally, Mr. Broadwater has stated that he does not wish to see his raised when those who work with him are not seeing raises this year. Although the board evaluation shows clearly that Mr. Broadwater's achievements are exemplary, there will be no adjustment to his salary. So that's what has come out of executive session evaluation, superintendent. Finally, if you would permit, I'd like to make a short, relatively short personal statement.
Dr. Lorenz, if I could ask, I think there's issues with the mics. So we could talk real close to them.
Got it.
Yep. Thank you.
I'm not sure you want to hear this, but all right, I'll bring it closer. This is an individual statement that I'm making. I am truly sorry that the funding situation for Loveland schools was not remedied. I'm sorry for our students, for our staff, for our community. But I'm most disappointed that the diligent, energetic work of those promoting passage of the levy. I am thankful that we have so many ardent supporters of public education in Loveland, and I'm truly hopeful that we as a board will be able to bring an issue forward that will be successful. The district is in need of funding for the future, and we all have to work together to make that happen. As I said, I'm sorry about that. I'm also disappointed and I'm tired. I'm disappointed that the vote count was as close as it was, and I'm tired both for myself and for the supporters or dissenters of the levy. I will say that I don't think the message criticizing the board seems to have significant. I note this because of this open letter that we've just that came from Loveland Voice and shared with the board in an email. It has also been shared on Loveland Magazine, I noticed today. And I do feel that I should respond to some of the claims made in that letter. Several years ago, the then seated board made statements about their actions and then accepted the voice of the voters and moved on with work toward the best interests of the district and community. Some still continue to bring up that levy. The open letter states that the district was not being truthful then, and at that time had operated without public scrutiny for many years. While I agree with the letter that it is uncomfortable to be criticized, it is also simply wrong to be blasted continually by untrue claims. There has always been public scrutiny of a Board of Education, and I have stated many times that I, as an individual board member, never lied about anything regarding that levy. I don't believe lies were disseminated, and I believe, in fact, that the levy information itself was what allowed Loveland voters to choose not to pass that levy. The information about the ask and the proposed spending was clear enough that there was a resounding public statement. Loveland was not interested in the vision presented by the board at that time. It is the portion of the Loveland community that has continued to dwell on and berate that. In fact, Loveland Voice itself claims responsibility for the failure of all 3 of the reasons. This board is an elected board that does in fact advocate. It seems to me that serving on a Board of Education would be rather disingenuous if a public servant, students and staff. I do see chaos in some boards of education around the country where those elected seem to be advocating against their schools rather than for them. This board has issued many statements, listened to many voices, done immense amounts of research. This board has listened to many opinions, suggestions, and criticism. Just because the answers proposed by the board happen to be different than some of the suggestions proposed does not mean that those have not been heard. The district has not yet made any statement about what cuts will be made now. It seems like there's a double accusation of either not making that statement yet or making a statement about cuts before approving the 5-year forecast this year. Tonight is the first meeting of the board after the failure of the levy, so we could not have heard any administrative recommendations or made any statement at all. I think that it would be a rather draconian move should the board be prepared this evening to announce a specific number of positions that will be eliminated or a specific dollar amount that will be cut. The board itself does not sell a levy, thus we cannot be selling one using fear tactics. The board has gone out of its way to provide as much information as possible, and the greater community has been invited to publicly participate in every board meeting since I have been on this board. There's very little vehicle for back and forth discussion within a board meeting, and no way that we as a board can hear every voice in the community and respond to every question, although I believe we have done a great job trying. As for considering curbing expenditures, I would submit that the district has never simply spent money, but has always considered the value and efficiencies that can be found in wise spending. On a completely personal note, for the past 31 years, I have tried to be careful not to accept sole responsibility. The success of this district is the result of the work of many, with my work as an individual being the least of that. The work of a 5-member board is the work of all 5, not one. One member cannot accept personal praise or blame or criticism for corporate action. If anyone listening to this statement believes that 30 years of service on a board of education constitutes a political career or results in personal fame or personal financial gain, they should try it. If in 1991 I had been interested in a political career, fame or gain, I certainly would not have chosen school board service. I believe that being a public servant is a worthy aspiration, and I also believe that public education is a crucial right and responsibility of our society. I believe that the future of our country depends on educating our entire population. Finally, this board should not have to take responsibility for community infighting. I firmly believe that our board has shown the will and the courage to do hard things, to actively listen to any voice, whether supporter or dissenter, and has shown that we would love to see unity rather than division in Loveland. We will continue to do our job and our part in that effort. I would encourage each citizen to seek that same unity. I would ask if anyone else has a statement that they would like to make as part of the report.
Believe it or not, I have something, but I always would rather you all go first if you have something you want to put out there.
Not seeing anything.
I didn't prepare anything, but I know that we had several people who represent themselves as the voice of the voice, if you will, in the audience. And while most were very respectful, laughing during your speech doesn't show what they're asking for. It doesn't show forward progress and respect and listening to both sides. So that's my only comment.
And I very rarely prepare. I have to say that I've had multiple conversations with multiple different people. It resonated with me when Kathy pointed out her failed political career, as I've been accused of that myself, and it just makes me scratch my head. I feel like one of the biggest problems with this process, both LJ and Leslie pointed out, which is it's inherently divisive. It pits a community against itself. It pits a group of people who feels that they can't afford more money to support the schools to a group of people who feels like they need more money to support the schools and their children in our society and our educational system. I've worked really hard. I know all of us have worked really hard at balancing the current tug of war. And I appreciate Mr. Shoemaker pointing out, that the pay scale in many of our contracts is mind-numbingly complex. As Kevin and I realized last year during the negotiation process. which the administration, the teachers also, participated in. Really what we need to do, and I'll just add one more thing. I very much feel some of the concerns that Kathy mentioned when I personally feel accused of not listening to people or not hearing them when I've just listened to lots of people and made a choice that was different than what another person wanted. And I've learned very much in this job that I can't make decisions that make everybody happy. And I also hear very clearly through the results of a voting process, we're a community right now that is torn about how to support these schools. I think that we as a board need to figure that out. And how do we get our community, as LJ pointed out and as Leslie mentioned, and as Marcia mentioned, how do we get that community together to move forward? And there will always be differences of opinion, and there will always be room for improvement. And I look forward to the next few years of doing this job to try to move us together. And that's it.
The one thing I would add is certainly do appreciate here in Loveland, having just been in Columbus, talking to folks that serve on boards and administrator roles around the state, and hearing about how contentious and how nasty some things can get in some boards around the state, that I think we actually have pretty respectful dialogue here in our boardroom, and I appreciate members of the community that come and share their concerns respectfully, and so I think we do have a higher level of dialogue than I'm hearing is happening in some communities around our state, and I'm grateful. And I do think there is, again, having been with all around the state, there is a concern for people everywhere in the state that deal with public education and are concerned about school funding to find better solutions. And so there are folks thinking about how do we better mobilize as concerned communities to advocate for the needs of students and for citizens to get a better system in place. I appreciate the efforts that Mike put out last year to meet with all of the representatives that are part of this community that are in the State House to express the concerns that Loveland has in particular. We have one new state rep that's part of Loveland that we already talked about getting her in soon to meet with us as well here in Loveland, so we can share those concerns and unique position we feel like we are in economically here in Loveland. So it's ongoing work. At the same time, as you said, we're not going to stop advocating for the needs of our kids. And I guess the one other thing I would add is if folks have real proposals for how Loveland can better, when it comes to things like shared services or school lunches or whatever it is, things in our budget or places where we could save, and they've got constructive ideas, we're always going to welcome them. But at the end of the day, we also are going to do the best that we can to manage those resources. When we see that we don't have adequate resources to provide the education that we think our kids need, we're going to continue to ask for money, and we can figure out how the best way to do that is, how much. But I think that is our response.
Okay, and so before I get into this, and get comfortable, this is going to take a few minutes. But before I get there, I want to make sure that, Rob, when we get down to the finance area, I be thinking about this, but I want you to be prepared, because I will ask the questions that Rick Bondahar asked earlier, and see if you can answer them.
Absolutely.
LJ, if you want to go to the state, God bless you. I got to tell you, good luck. I hope you're successful. If there's anything I can to be of help or support, I'm good. But I'm a real pragmatist. I just think that's going to be a rough journey. But God bless you for making that offer. And I would urge everybody in the community, go ahead and lend support to an effort like that. Okay, having said that, this is a kind of a hard thing to do. I always think there's a cathartic process in developing, at least for me, what I say at these meetings go through a tremendous amount of thought, visions, hours and hours to squeeze down to a few minutes. And I change in the process of writing these things. Helpful, but it's painful at the same time. And I just say that as a way to try to help folks understand that the people that sit in these chairs and those chairs and stand in front of classes throughout these buildings are human beings. And they have sensitivities. So just be aware of that. So it's now been 2.5 years, can't believe it, 2.5 years since a resident reached out to encourage me to put retirement aside for a while and join the board on the heels of a double resignation in the aftermath of the failed levies. Honestly, I did not aspire to do this, but I did feel obligated to try to help. I think I was elected in November to finish the work that I started. The work hasn't been, believe it or not, defined by a levy. It was never defined by a levy passing. It was much more defined by establishing fiscal discipline and stability within the district, growth in the district's leadership, and creating a culture of openness. You should know, probably you may not know this, but you should know I didn't vote for the November 2019 levy. And long story, but if COVID hadn't gotten in the way, I would have voted against the March 2020 levy as well. I tried to vote against it. I couldn't get my absentee ballot in time. So my personal agenda was not to maintain the status quo here. I had no pre-existing loyalties. I was not part of the education system, if you will. I did come in with a focus, lifelong focus on objectivity, practicality, and facts. If you don't have them, we don't have long conversations. If you have them, we have good conversations. In my view, some things did need changing. Human judgment errors were made. I found human beings that were changed by, in fact, damaged by the relentless public conflicts and criticisms. They became more reserved in their openness to the community as a result. It's a two-way street. Many had grown up in public education, so they were a product of that environment, are a product of that environment. But I've always found them eager to think about how the commercial world that I come from would handle things differently. What I couldn't find, what I could not find, and God knows I tried to find this, despite all the charges and my own research, were people that lied or didn't care about this community and its children. I couldn't find that, and I don't believe it exists. But that was a long time ago. You know, I still hear it takes time to repair broken trust. Still hear it. But I think we have to be honest with ourselves and realize there comes a point where it becomes an individual's decision to move on or to stay put. That decision is personal and it's individual. And it's not driven by anyone else by this point in time. All I can do, and this is what I try to do, is to urge the board and the district to continue to do the right thing and make honesty, transparency, and the resulting trust a centerpiece of every day. Moving on, I believe the cost of a funding failure can be potentially profound. Unfortunately, yours truly has had to force expenses to balance to revenue way too many times in my career. I don't think we will like what that actually looks like if it becomes a reality here. Because Mike and Rob did what they were supposed to do and brought the issue up before it was an emergency, I've been able to urge that we be thoughtful and careful about all of our next steps. This is what's been going on all week. if you start to see, as I put it, the lawn growing a bit longer, you understand what I mean by that? Before you start to see staff reduced, understand that that's a focus on trying to preserve the talent and the heart of the school as best as we possibly can. We are reasonably staffed today, but there is nothing acceptable about an image of young, motivated employees leaving our buildings with pink slips in hand. We should all do everything we can to avoid such a thing happening. This is the real world, and these are real people, and it has real impact on an organization. As I said, I wasn't in favor of the previous levies, but the fact I supported this one says I have seen needed changes, and I'm close enough to all of that to know. And turns out I'm in a very big crowd of citizens who thought differently this time, just not quite enough to have a different outcome. About 8% more of the voters were in favor of it this time versus 20. A couple hundred more and the election would have flipped. That part I find encouraging, that a lot of the community understood that changes have in fact happened and rejected the argument that this was a replay of 2020. But it also says what it says. The levy was rejected, and we need to learn and adapt from that. Why it was rejected is a subject worth careful examination. How much of it was the economy? How much of it was rejection of the argument that money is needed? How much of it was ideologically against public schools or taxes? How much of it was the type of levy? How much of it was just not being fully informed? I think all of those and others make up the answer. I don't think that we are likely to change ideological reasoning or household financial challenges. We can and should make headway on informing the community about the reality of these superbly performing and well-cost controlled schools. These are undeniable and easily substantiated facts. What won't go away is the fact that this is not really about an actual spending problem, at least when you look at what we should expect to spend by referencing hundreds of other districts across the state. Loveland does very well in that respect. But we are at the low end of the scale of state funding because of our high income levels and property values, and that goes into the state funding formula. We don't control that. That is what it is. Plus, we feel the impact of low commercialization in our resulting taxes. So it can feel like a spending problem when in fact, it is much more a structural tax problem. The whole truth needs to include these critical facts before we make an unintentional and tragic mistake. I'm going to bet that many of you have not looked at the detail of your personal property tax bill and how it's changed over time. 2017 was the oldest I could, 5:30 today. The thought occurred to me that I was in one of Mike's community sessions on the levy, and a very, very smart gentleman who was an absolute no on the levy happened to mention to me after, he turned yes by the end of it, by the way, but he happened to mention to me, he didn't know what his taxes were. He never looks at his real estate taxes. And I thought, you know, gee, okay, all right, so fine. 2017 was the oldest one I could find this morning. And when I compared it to 2021, our overall tax bill, and I'm in Hamilton, is up by 2.2%. But within that increase, it got really interesting. Human services, and there's 3-4 line items that I lumped together into human services, have gone up 7.5%. It's not a small number, so 7.5%. The township's share, Rick, you'll tune into this one, was up by 25.7%. Parks were up by 85%. and the library was up by 94%. Tells me we are a generous community at the voting booth, reflected in the large amount of increased human services. We also seem to like our parks. Remember low commercialization? And we like feeling protected by our police and fire departments. But guess what happened with schools? Anybody have any ideas? School taxes went down 7.6%. Not sure exactly why versus staying flat, which is what I would have expected. But I called Rob and he thinks it's related to bond repayment progress. But think about that. At some point, it gets unavoidable. The inevitable result will be an eventual withering away of the gem that we have in these schools. And when that happens, people will get the word that this isn't the desirable place that it's been for a very long time, and the decline will have started. We all own these schools, and how we treat them will reflect on our community in the short term and beyond. We are guilty. We are guilty of almost always putting up the so-called permanent type of levy. Guilty as charged, as many similar districts, frankly, do. It's not because it's just an uncreative bad habit, but the reality of finding a realistic and viable revenue strategy that's broadly acceptable to our voters is one of the toughest problems in Ohio education. We're not alone in this. I am open to every fair and realistic alternative, however, going forward. But be clear-minded about this. There is no panacea in any funding approach. Different parts of the community will be proponents for their own favored version, but not necessarily another's. And to pass a proposal still needs a majority. The continuing or so-called permanent levy on this last ballot was guaranteed to cause another levy in several years by the very nature of how a given property tax's revenue is capped at its inception in Ohio. Just the way it works. A fixed term levy would have to be renewed at a higher rate and have potentially major negative consequences if it failed, like Franklin's just did. That's a big deal for them. 16 mills, I think it is, that went down from 16 to 0. The fact that inflationary cost increases will inevitably drive school districts back to voters is the built-in accountability of all these property taxes. Eliminating the repetitive need for Ohio property tax levies of any type, frankly, is almost like changing the laws of physics. The only tax alternative that doesn't need to continually go back to the voters for their oversight is the income tax. That by law goes up when income goes up. Automatically passing on a share of income growth to the schools would solve a lot of revenue problems. But if you are for continuing accountability, income taxes don't do that as well. And lots of people are not in the least interested in new income taxes. An earned income tax shifts the burden, you can argue with me on these numbers, from maybe 15% of the population to maybe the other 85. But when we are looking for common agreement, that's a divisive use of a tax strategy that across the state is typically used in much more rural areas where there is a much different relationship between how much property you own and how much you earn than what we see in Loveland and other denser districts. These are not just things I've pulled out of the air. This is research, okay? So this is a complex issue, and finding a solution that works for the majority is no easy task. Thousands of voters, including myself, changed our stance. That shows things are different now. Arguing they're the same without considering those facts is really counterproductive. But it's time, it's really time to have constructive discussions with people who voted against the levy, but also have open minds to find out what we can do to make this district survive and flourish together.
Thanks for taking the time to work on that.
Thank you. All right, I think that our waiting for their turn, and we appreciate their patience and attention. And it is their turn. I understand they're going to alternate. Austin, you're going to start, then Kate, then back again. I think is it best that they go up to the podium, or are they okay there?
Thank you.
Would have figured that out, I'm sure.
I just wanted to start off by saying that it does make me sad that the 5 of you, actually the 7 of you, have been labeled enemies of a civil war in Loveland. And from personal experience, over my past 2 years serving as a student representative, I've had the honor of meeting each one of you, shaking your hand and conversing with you. And I truly believe I just want what's best for our school. Thank you for that. I want to thank you for your work on the levy, and I just wanted to encourage you guys to continue to push for the betterment of our schools, and I hope our student reports serve as a reminder of the lives you're changing with your work. So Michaela is out today, and so I'm going to give the reports for her. Then Kate's going to go with the LIS and LMS reports, and then I'm going to wrap up with the high school report. So LES, 3rd grade, participated in the fall state air testing on October 19th and 20th. This test provides baseline information for teachers and is used for instructional decision making. LECC, LPS, and LES completed first quarter conferences on 8th and 10th. Preschool has additional evening conferences on the 17th of November to meet family needs. Schools were able to offer families both in-person and virtual options again this year. LPS is implementing a revamp of the positive behavior intervention and supports program. This work includes opening up a brand new Tiger Trading Post, which is a store that will sell small novelties and experiences like lunches with the principal. And they will, students will spend their Tiger tickets that they get for showing care, respect, and responsibility. LECC is working to finalize communication and plans for preschool and kindergarten enrollment for the 2023 through 2024. And more information regarding the plans will be released this winter. Preschool through 4th grade have been very involved in helping the community this November. They donated 2,200 pairs of socks for Socktober. They're working with Read to Feed with the Life Food Pantry. They're collecting food for the Pass It On food drive. And they raised over $60,000 this year, this year's dance-a-thon for the LEPTA. Staff continue to complete public school work safety modules. Students and staff participate in safety drills on a regular basis, and the building safety committee have completed their fall meeting. LECC, LPS, and LES also participated in school safety training with Athletic Director Rich Bryant. LHS has also done that earlier in the year, and that's all part of the district's focus on school safety across all buildings. Lastly, Mrs. Jen Foran and Mr. Kevin Fancher continue to participate in the principals' roundtables with regional principals in Hamilton, Warren, and Butler counties.
Thank you.
My name is Kate, and I speak for all the students when we say thank you for put into making this school a better place. So I have the report on some important building and department projects from LIS and LMS. Students and staff at LIS and LMS participated in Red Ribbon Week, October 24th through the 28th. The theme was Celebrate Life, Live Drug-Free, and the campaign encourages students to live a drug-free life. Students dressed in daily themes in support of this cause. LIS staff also participated in QPR training throughout the past few weeks. QPR stands for Question, Persuade, and Refer, and these 3 simple steps can help save a life from suicide. QPR focuses on recognizing the warning signs of a suicide crisis and responding to them. This training provides skills that can be used inside and outside the classroom setting to support individuals during challenging times. The LMS Student Council also hosted a fall dance for students on Thursday, October 27th. Students came dressed up in costumes, there was music and concessions, and it was good times were had by all who attended. The LMS students recently completed their production of the Raise Your Voice Fall Drama Performance. The student cast and crew did a wonderful job and put on a great show over the past weekend to multiple packed houses. Thank you to all of the drama directors for providing such a fun and inclusive experience for all. In collaboration with Life Food Pantry and the PTSA, LIS and LMS students are currently participating in the Pass It On food drive. This food drive collects food for Loveland families in need for the holidays and helps stock the shelves of the food pantry for future needs. Students will be bringing in goods, and awards will be provided to those homerooms who bring in the most donations. Students from LIS, Tiger Brain Trust, and LMS Student Leadership Team are currently working together on developing fun winter and holiday spirit days for our students who participate in Thanksgiving and in between Thanksgiving and winter break. This provides time for students to work together in support of a fun experience for all students, the culture at LIS and LMS. A great Loveland Intermediate School tradition continued last week with the Walk to Water. In class, students learned about the challenges some global communities have with access to clean water, which often involves families carrying water long distances. They recreated this long walk to water with jugs of water they carried through neighborhoods surrounding LIS. The water was then donated to families in need through Matthew 25 Ministry. LIS raised $12,600 to drill wells in Sudan. Over the last 8 years, Loveland Intermediate School has raised funds to help create 8 wells. The 5th graders decided to recognize the bus drivers as part of their LIS Kindness Project. The bus drivers were welcomed with donuts and coffee Friday morning and received handwritten letters from the students that ride their bus. Special thanks to Mr. Waple, Mrs. Coldiron, and Mr. Rodriguez for organizing. Some important upcoming events for LIS and LMS. November 16th through the 18th, the 5th graders will be taking their annual Camp Kern. On November 29th, there will be an LMS band concert. December 5th through the 7th, LIS 6th grade music concert. And December 8th, the LMS spelling bee.
All right, and now for the high school. Congratulations to both our girls and boys cross-country team. They both did really well. Fall sports are officially over, and Fall Sports Awards Night was last Wednesday, where athletes were for their academic and athletic performances over the season. We hope everyone will come out to support our LHS drama in, I can't figure out the word, but for their Wizard of Oz show. Their opening performance will be tomorrow at 7 o'clock, and it will run through Saturday, November 19th, starting at 7 o'clock each night, and additional Saturday at 2 o'clock. The LHS Athletic Boosters put on another awesome and successful craft show. The counseling department hosted 12 incoming 9th grade students for a shadow day at the high school. Congratulations to Mrs. Ray Jean Connor, who won the adaptive Adapted Physical Education Teacher of the Year Award. Thank you to our LHS Jazz Band and a cappella groups for performing at the and also selfishly, since I don't believe the student representatives will be presenting until January again, I'm here to promote our LHS Winter Dance, which Senior Ellie Zicka and I are planning with Student Council. It's a disco theme. It's on January 6th, so if parents could please get their students to very much. And then finally, I just wanted to say that Michaela, Kate, and I are really excited about presenting that we're going to provide a student and staff spotlight for our respective buildings starting in the new year. We're excited to try this out and hope it will be helpful in centering citizen support around the students and faculty of Loveland Schools. Thank you.
Those were really awesome reports, and not because you gave us such encouraging words, but because it's really important that we have the student voice here at the table. You're doing a fine job of that. Certainly, hopefully there'll be some parents who see the board meeting and encourage students. I think I just have one student one grandchild I might encourage to come to the dance, but certainly we'll hope that we get good turnout there. Just letting the board know, I do intend to see the Wizard of Oz on Thursday. I don't know if you are going, but one of the first things I learned about Loveland Schools years and years ago, but way before I was on, was that the productions that Loveland Schools put on are nothing short of fantastic. They're close to professional shows many times, and they're really just a great opportunity to see these kids and their talents.
I'll in fact be there every night. My daughter is playing Dorothy in the play, so I think it's a particularly good production.
Okay, then I will.
Yeah.
Very good. Anything else for the students? As we always say, you are welcome to go get some work done if you need to, or you're welcome to stay for the rest. Thank you very much.
Nice job.
Good job. We will move on to superintendent's updates. Follow that.
Thank you. Austin and Kate, you guys were awesome. Thank you very much. I don't think I can follow them, but what I would say is thank you, just like they did. I won't be as Austin, but to our 5 board members, thank you for all the hard work that you put in. Public service, I don't know if there's a more difficult public service than to be on a school board in your own community where you live. And I appreciate all the work. I've got in my office a little quote from Teddy Roosevelt that says, "Man in the arena," and you've certainly placed yourself in the arena. And I appreciate all the support. And it's great to hear from our kids as well. So with that, what I would like to say is, Mr. Doherty, you had asked me the last meeting about some questions that came up in regards to master's degrees and all of that. So we did, and Garth and Stacey, if I forget anything, just jump in and let me know. We dug into a little bit in our teaching staff. We have 88% of our teachers have master's degrees, 75% have continuing contracts. I will explain it a little bit. There are 2 types of contracts for our teachers. There are limited contracts. There are continuing contracts. Limited contract is usually what a teacher is going to start off with. A teacher, there is an educational license that the teacher has to have through the Ohio Department of Education. The way that they maintain that license is they have to have continuing education. Most of your young teachers that start off with bachelors, and some of the young teachers start with masters right out of the gate. But if they start with a bachelor's, knowing that they've got to get 6 hours in order to renew their license, what they're going to do is start a master's. That's what they're going to do. And so when you look at the continuing contract, to achieve a continuing contract, you have to be teaching for 5 years, 3 of which are in the district that you're looking to get to continuing contract with. You have to have 30 hours so that you pass your bachelor's so that you can get a continuing contract. With 30 hours, that means you're pretty close to a master's, about 36 33 to 36 hours, depending on the program. So what you see, and this is same for school districts across the state of Ohio, this is Ohio Revised Code, 3300s. I think it's 3319, something like that. But you will see that the school districts, the majority of teachers are probably going to have continuing contract because it takes 5 years. Have the majority of your staff with more than 5 years, 3 of which are in your district, they're moving towards a master's degree. So obviously, if 88% of your staff has masters, that means 12% have bachelors, and that would be the kiddos that we're hiring. And we've started with our hiring practice. We saved over $600,000. We're going to continue that as we move forward. And so they will start, like I said, with bachelors. Some do start with masters when they come out of their program. So Garth, Stacy, did I forget anything in regards to kind of the mechanics of it? Okay. So I don't know if that answered all your questions.
Most of it, Mike and David, I hope you're listening, because the question we asked Mike to try to get answers to tonight. The only thing I don't think you covered, what's the value? Why would somebody want?
Well, the value of a continuing contract is a little bit more security. The continuing contract, I think there's a misnomer that people think that once a teacher gets a continuing contract that you cannot move to dismiss them. You can. It would help with seniority if it gets down to where there is a reduction in force. If you have a teacher with 10 years but on a limited contract, teacher with 10 years on a continuing contract, and they've got the same certification, the continuing contract teacher would be above in seniority. To me, that would be the big advantage. Continuing contract, it provides a little bit more security. The continuing contract, again, that's not unique to Loveland. That's Ohio Revised Code. We value when you talk about teachers. I don't want to discredit the fact that years of experience, yes, they do teach you how to become a master teacher, but also education as an educator. I would believe this, but as you get education, you become a better educator in the classroom as well. So the value of increased education allows us to produce amazing kids like Austin and Kate. So.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Just to because I was looking at this earlier, this is 21 data, but we have a highly, what I call tenured or experienced workforce here. In 21, almost 71% of our teachers had 10 plus years of experience. And I mentioned that on the heels of your comment about hiring practices, 100,000. One of the things that became evident in the last couple of years was what I call a bolus of tenure. If you kind of looked at seniority, and how many people are at different seniority levels, there's a large group of people represented here that are deep into their careers here, causes the pay scales to be relatively high in and of itself, right? Aside from the nature of the contract. That's the bad news. The good news, in a sense, is that a lot of those folks in the coming years are going to reach retirement age, and they're going to roll off, and more of them are going to be ultimately replaced through a different hiring strategy that you've just started to unfold in the last couple of years. So there's some changes that will hopefully occur in years to come. But because this is people's employment, it does take time to realize change like that.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think we can't discredit that. Sometimes I see it. I can tell you I was a much better teacher my 15th year in the classroom than I was. And you get what you pay for, right? You get what you pay for. And so I don't want to discredit and say, well, we can't wait to get rid of the veteran teachers, save money. The reason we have a perfect report card is because of our staff. The other thing I think we forget, and as a math guy, I can't help but say we did reduce the teaching staff by 17 about 2 years ago. So when you reduce a teaching staff, what teachers do you reduce? It's the young teachers. And so you've dropped off 17 of the lowest salaries, which what happens to your teacher salary average now? It goes up because you've got the veteran teachers. So there's a lot of nuances to it. But at the end of the day, Loveland is not unique. This is not unique to Loveland. It's the way education works. And we have a very, very professional staff. But I hope that answered the questions.
I think it did. Was that helpful, David? Good, okay.
I want to let me just pile on you a little bit, and we haven't talked about
Sure.
this at all. I understand that, that to some degree, we have the situation that we have. We have competing districts that we have to compete with. We have to attract teachers to come to our district. What I'm interested in from a board standpoint is, are we doing things significantly different than other districts are? For instance, the continuing contract level of 75%, is that a standard for teachers who have the same years of employment and tenure as our teachers? Is that average across other districts? Are we more generous than other districts in giving those contracts? And you don't have to answer that question right now. And to a similar question, this goes back to the information we were given today. Does Loveland provide a higher incentive for teachers to reach a higher level of education faster than other districts do? And thus, are we penalizing ourselves to some degree by offering a more generous benefit? And again, I don't need you to answer those questions, but those are questions that we need to answer.
Yeah, the response I would have is, I don't know empirically the answers, but I have not seen it different than the districts I've been in, which have been pretty good academic districts. The other thing is the Madeira study is out there, and I could share that with the board, and you will see that we might be high in some areas, low in other areas. That's something that we talk about. We've got the seniority list up every day. We're looking at where are we going with things, because we know the community has said we need to reduce some costs. So that's what we're going to look at. But I can send out the Madeira study if you haven't seen it, and it'll show you where we rank. I don't think we ever want to stop being creative. We don't have to do what other districts do just because that's what they do. But we have to work within the negotiated agreement to see how that would move. But I think we should always be open to look and see. It's better to be out front of something than to be behind.
Mike, I don't know what the reality is in the public world.
Sure.
In the private world, there's confidentiality laws under Labor Relations Act about what goes on in negotiations. So I don't know if the same thing applies in this world. But I do think it's fair to say that the district had an ambition to change its position relative to other districts over the course of time.
Right.
That was a very, very challenging part of negotiations. But ultimately, I think there was an agreement that I think the teachers became a partner with us in trying to achieve something that was, one of the words of the day is sustainability, right?
Right.
But a model that was more sustainable than perhaps the model that earlier. So I say this because, again, you hear these concerns that nothing's different, nothing has changed. But, some of us have been in the trenches changing things. And this happens to be one of the things that is very real. It's tangible. It will happen over the course of time. It's just that, it's not like that.
Right. Well, and Dr. Lorenz brought up STRS, so I'll bring up STRS. Added 5 more years for our teachers to teach at the top pay salary. And so a lot of school districts are feeling that crunch. You've got 5 more years of that top salary. And STRS did that there's no help coming in regards to that, right? So that's why the negotiated agreement being able to stretch out the steps, what you're referring to is being creative because the rules were changed, the goalposts were moved with retirement, and it added quite a few years at the higher salary. But I think the board and the negotiation team did a very good job of trying to adjust, but you can always continue to look at. But
And you know, again, I have to say this to be fair, because sometimes the teachers, because they earn well, it looks like, right? They earn well. They become the object of an enormous amount of scrutiny. And, you know, I kind of feel for the teachers that, you know, have to go home, and half of them, give or take, live here in town. And half of them go home after having been talked about,
Right.
you know, in all kinds of discussions. The fact is, a year worth of very, very, very difficult negotiation was completed with a sense ultimately of cooperation. That, you know, they worked with the district to make change. And I think that's fair to say, and it should be said.
And I would even pile on that it's more than fair to say, and it needs to be lauded, because if anybody comes to you and says, hey, we're going to set up a new contract where you're going to be making less money over the course of your career, not more, your initial impulse is to be, no, you're not. But we worked very well as partners together, not only to hold down an annual increase, but also to extend the yearly step schedule by 7 steps, which causes a very significant long-term change in the growth of salary. And, you know, there's the complexity of the contracting is that there's still a third piece of that, which is the educational. And I think it's really important for us to understand our benchmarks and where we stand. And the teachers worked very hard with us to get to a point that was fair for them and our community.
Right.
And you and I recognize that more
Right.
than
I mean, in my old life, I had dozens and dozens and dozens of organized labor contracts in my world, and after a while, I came to understand that a good contract, kind of the best contract that you ended up with, was one where everybody was unhappy, because it's a friction-oriented process.
I know both of our associations are not deaf to what the community is saying. And so I laud them for working with us, knowing that they've got to do that. And again, I will echo, this is the most professional, best staff we can ask for. I mean, I think the proof's in the pudding with our results. But
I want to echo to what Mike said, because so often as board members, because we're so concerned about the financial piece, often most focused on lauding that work of hiring the younger teachers that don't have the experience, so our expenses. But again, thinking about the importance of those folks that have so much experience, and just thinking about our discussion earlier about a play that's happening. I was telling someone earlier today, about what Mr. Miller does in our schools, conducting all of our high school vocal ensembles, in addition to running 3 show choirs that perform at very high levels, and directing all of our drama productions. You don't do that your first year out of college, and I think that's true in lots of other disciplines as well that I'm not as familiar with that. So I just think that's an important piece that we always have to remember. That we've got some really great experienced people that bring a lot to the table for the salaries that we're paying them.
yeah, that's the tough balance, right? Is the education and the finances, getting in the sweet spot where you want to be. Yep.
Well, the other tough part is we're talking about people. I mean, we're a people business, but that then is such a large part of our finances that when you talk about cutting, there's not enough stuff in the non-people part of the business to cut to make a difference in the expenditures. I mean, it is a tension in that aspect as well.
Right.
And the part that I think is always difficult to understand is that these folks are our employees, and they are the way things happen here. As good as you are, they do the work, right?
They do the work.
They do the work,
They
right?
do the work.
They make the difference.
I try and
out there.
keep it out of the classroom so they can
And there's
learn.
this, to Kathy's point, there is this rub between, we're trying to save money and keep all of these folks motivated, part of the team, feeling good about being a part of this district and, kind of fired up in the morning to go out and do the good work that only they get to do.
Right.
So it's always a balancing act, trying to keep your people, your teams motivated and, kind of tend to the bottom line, the business side of the business.
I know I'm excited with the levy behind us. I feel like I have not been seeing kids as much as I'd like to. I'm excited to get out and see what's happened. I would encourage anybody to go into the building and just see what we're doing. Our teachers they're rock stars.
I got some feedback about you the other day. You went in, you started to teach in a physics class or something?
Yeah. Newton's third law. It was a little rusty, but I got it. I got it
I didn't
back.
think Mr. Waterby,
K through 12. We'll do it. I got some Spanish I can do. Yeah.
anything else, Mr.
No,
Broadwater?
that's it. Thank you.
That's your report. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, then we have 3 board resolutions. The first one is, I mentioned last month, the reason that we do this in November is that Great Oaks constitutes its board in January, and if they need to wait for the boards to send their representatives until after a January organizational meeting, then it makes it tough for them. So this resolution is on the agenda to appoint the Loveland representative to the Great Oaks Board of Directors. And so I would ask if there is a motion to do that.
So moved, the motion stated in the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
And you will note that this is because of the way the law changed in Ohio. There was a move to make representatives to career and technical boards 3-year term. So that's what this is for. And it has my name here because I did not hear anyone else to do it.
Glad to see your name there again.
Yep.
Thank you.
So moved.
We've got the motion. Second, you can't move it again.
Kathy,
And
before-
so I would abstain on this when we go to vote.
Sure. Before we vote on it, this is actually another line on our tax bill. And I'm not sure that folks know what this is. Can you take 30 seconds and just say what Great Oaks is?
Yes, Great Oaks is the Career and Technical Consortium for 37 school districts. Yeah, Hamilton County, I forget how many counties now, goes to,
All are part of 12.
pardon?
All are part of 12.
12 counties. So it is a consortium that came into being because there is a law on the books for career and technical education. If a district does not participate in and sends their students to a career and technical campus, then the school itself must provide at least,
20.
I thought it was 25.
Okay.
25 programs available in their school that they provide for themselves and 5 career pathways out of those 25 courses. So that, in other words, schools used to have programs. And when they had wood shop, when they had a variety of homemaking things, you could get a career certification as you moved through. It has now, for most of the schools in Ohio, moved to a consortium. And so Butler County has a career tech campus or set of campuses. Warren County has career. So Great Oaks is the one that serves most of the districts in this area, but then goes as far as Wilmington has 4 campuses. It has currently a continuing levy. Great Oaks had always done things as a 10-year renewable levy. And the last time that the levy was renewed, it was done as a continuing levy. That is very good for the Great Oaks because it has now gotten down to the floor, which means that it does actually grow with increased valuation in the properties. Loveland, to get down to the floor, would have a long, long way to go, couldn't ever happen. But there is a minimum amount of millage that is allowed to grow. And so Great Oaks just this year is beginning to see some growth in that revenue from their levy. They are also seeing, as are all career and technical campuses right now, a great renewed emphasis from the legislative side. There's a very, very big push. And I think it's a great thing. I think that our society has moved back a little from the everyone must go to a four-year college and get a four-year degree and move on to a master's degree and become going back to valuing more some of those kinds of careers that can come out of career tech. I will tell you that some of our graduates graduate from a career tech program after their junior and senior year at Great Oaks, and they have starting salaries that in welding, in plumbing, in electrical kinds of things, they have salaries that are the end of people who are on the teacher's salary scale here in Loveland.
Did I misread that some go into the fire departments?
There is a fire program. Great Oaks also does quite a bit of adult education as well. So many of the fire and police safety programs that they do are for people back after high school to do adult program as well. But there are those programs. There's nursing programs. There's a great culinary program. Many of the students do go on to 2 or 4 year college programs after that, but they are certified in a particular program when they finish at grade.
And from what I've seen, the facilities look pretty impressive.
They're able to do things with facilities and with the amount of programs that individual schools would not part of this program. So they have, if you think it's fun having a 5-member board meeting, you should have a 35-member board meeting. Most of the work done at Great Oaks is done in committee. So there are different committees that then bring the resolution to the board.
Do you mind, can you just get a quick second, because I don't know the answer to this. How do we as Loveland schools interact with Great Oaks and make sure that our students are aware of those opportunities or identify the students who may want to be more aware?
Great Oaks has a good program of presenting to both in the 9th and the 10th grade students who, and in fact do some work earlier than that to help begin to make a career path, not a decision, but a career path program that they would like to travel. But they have opportunities for students to go to the Great Oaks campus. Our Loveland's main campus is the Live Oaks campus on Buckwheat Road in the Milford area. But a Loveland student can go to Great Oaks career campuses as long as there is room at that. They're funneled into the Live Oaks programs. But if there's a program, for example, that they can apply to go to that program as well. They just need to get transportation to there. But they work with the counselors in Loveland, but they also have their own program where they take the students there and show them. They also have open, and I generally let the board know, it's been a little less prevalent since there was COVID, but they have on most of their campuses, they have a day when the community is invited to come in. So you can go in, Live Oaks has an animal tech program. You can take your dog to get you can get your nails done in the cosmetology program. They show you a variety of things they're open to. Also have done a great summer camp program that I'm hoping will come back now that COVID is not there, which is for the younger students to begin to get them what's available on the campuses.
I believe our 8th grade, don't our 8th graders, I think they head over. But we also have Truce Mitchell's, you mentioned the fire department, Miami Township, our career pathways in-house. And they work with the kiddos at the middle school level to develop the career pathways that might lead to Great Oaks as well. But Great Oaks does a very good job of getting here and talking to our kids. And I think there is a move to where students are a little bit more open to the facilities over there because there are so many opportunities.
I neglected to add that there are quite a few satellite programs as well.
Yeah.
There are programs that Great Oaks runs that actually happen here. on Loveland campus and many other campuses. There are business programs that happen, teaching academy. So they have gone out to the campuses, particularly. It's a little bit difficult for them to leave their campus here in Loveland and go to another campus. That wasn't 5 minutes, was it?
Well, thank you. Thank you. I really do think a lot of us are unaware of this, and that really put a face on it, if you will.
I've been enjoying service to Great Oaks for quite some time. I know that the first there I went, an observer, someone on the Loveland board said, you might enjoy doing this, and why don't you go to this meeting with me? And I went to this board meeting and they bought and I said, now this is a board that I it was an airplane. It was not a serviceable airplane for the aviation program that the students worked on. But nonetheless, they bought an airplane. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Thank you for your service on that board and for clearly engaging well in that work and caring about it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Mr. Giuffre.
Sorry, I'm not quite there.
Oh, sorry.
Pedaling back.
You moved too far ahead.
The second was from whom? I'm sorry.
Mrs. Washburn.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Doughty,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz,
Abstain.
Dr. Schwechenow,
Yes.
and Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Motion carried. Now, hopefully this next item will not take too long. It's a Tuesday, Reverend Eilert. I don't mean to pick on you. The next item is to establish the board organizational meeting for January 10th, 2023. And so I will make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, there it is. And this is because the January 10th meeting, if we have it, is when we will establish the rest of the meetings for the year, all of the other organizational items. We will begin to discuss some of this on December 10th, but on January 10th is when that would happen. There will also be a budget hearing, Mr. Giuffre?
Yes.
And that will happen, the board meeting will start at 6 as normal, but the budget hearing will happen
5:30.
5:30.
And there are some legal date boundaries that cause us to want it in this particular week, as I understand it, right?
Yes.
So that's kind of why it ends up on January 10th.
Both for the organization meeting and the budget hearing.
And so it is for the purpose of organization. Other business can be conducted there. There will be an agenda put out. It is a regular board meeting, but it is specified by law as an organizational meeting. There can be other items on the agenda. There may not need to be another meeting in January. It just depends on if any kind of business things pop up or we talk about things, but this may be the sole January meeting. And then we would set the rest of the meetings, the monthly meetings after that. Any questions? All right, can we vote on that?
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Mr. Doughty,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Dr. Schwechenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes. Motion carried. This one I also hope won't take too long. This would be a resolution to elect a president pro tem. This is the person who gets the organizational meeting started, because at that meeting, we vote on a president and a vice president for the 2023 year. So we need a president pro tem to start that meeting. And so I would suggest that someone might want to volunteer and make a motion to elect themselves as a president pro tem, and then we'll go from there.
I volunteer, Reverend Eilert.
Did you hear that, Reverend Eilert?
Fine. Sure.
You want it?
All right, Mrs. Washburn is making a motion
Second.
to elect, and Mr. Doherty seconded very quickly to elect Reverend Eilert as president pro tem. Questions, discussion, and you said you are all right with that.
Sure.
Jonathan, just to put it in perspective,
5 minute.
a 5-minute job. So
Unless you get elected president.
what's that?
Get elected president.
President.
In those 5 minutes, you can eliminate all Saturday meetings.
You're never going to lift it.
Executive decree.
This basically calls the meeting to order, and then we get on with everything else, including electing the year's officers.
Right. That's right. Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Giuffre?
Mrs. Washburn? Yes. Mr. Darty?
Yes.
Reverend Eilert?
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz?
Yes.
Dr. Schweitzer?
Yes.
Motion carried. We then move into Director of Human. I think Mr. Collier has been standing back there waiting for us to get to his resolutions for quite some time, so we will, what would you prefer, Mr. Collier? Do you have a general report before we do anything? At first?
There's quite a few, so we could just go one by one.
All right.
Be best.
So we would need a motion. This is for resignations and employment of certified classified homebound substitute and supplemental positions for the 22-23 school year.
Moved.
Mrs. Washburn moved. Is there a second?
Second.
And Dr. Swetchnow seconded. Mr. Collier, you want to give us a report, and then we'll see if you have any questions.
Sounds great. The first thing I want to, in section A, I want to make sure to point out that we have a high school English teacher who has let us know that she is retiring at the end of the school year, and that is Miss Rhonda Overbeck. So she's worked with us for a number of years, so I just wanted to make sure here at the board meeting to congratulate her on her retirement and to thank her publicly for all of her service that she's had with our kids and our community. Also, you'll see in that same section, if I could draw your attention to item 9, there is an extended leave of absence, and that's one of our music teachers from the elementary building who has been battling and trying to recover from a brain surgery. And her recovery is coming along. She's just not quite at the place where she thought she was going to be at this time. And so that leave of absence is continuing for the rest of the school year. And I would just like to wish her and her family the best as they keep fighting and keep trying to get back to be with our kids. On down here a little further in section B, that is for an LECC art teacher. So just guys, putting in board updates, but there was a retirement by Mrs. Niemeyer. If you guys recall who she is, she was the art teacher at the elementary school. And the part-time employee who was .8, that's Katie Timfley. She was at the intermediate school and at LECC, splitting her time. She assumed the role of Miss Niemeyer as the full-time, the 1.0 FTE. And Miss Durham is the one who we have found to replace Miss Timfley because of the retirement. So make sure to welcome her to our group. In section D, you will see the employment of classified staff. There are 3 folks listed there. One is replacement of an employee that was terminated. And then the other 2 have been in the past couple of weeks, and actually even the board meeting before this. Special education, those 2 special education aides for our rooms. So you guys have been knowing that that's coming at the October FTE count, because we had already posted one of those 2 positions. There was 1 position there, and then in the FTE count for this particular month is the other one, but they're both being officially hired tonight. Both have already started, all 3 actually. And then the very bottom section, section G, I just want to make sure to point out that all of this, the payment for all of these extracurricular pieces that are listed here, those are all paid by OHSAA, which is Ohio High School Athletic Association. In essence, Loveland hosted these postseason events, and OHSAA pays money for our folks to work. So when you see the folks here that are listed here that are getting paid, that is not money, that's money that OHSAA has paid us to pay them. Just wanted to make sure to point that out. Any questions?
I will just note, you have also on the agenda file that's available, that's the ongoing FTE count.
Yes.
I didn't know if you were going to talk about it or not, but I know you talked about FTE in
Sure.
the HR. You're always
Yeah.
careful to show us that we're not adding, or if we are adding someone, the reason we're adding someone
Absolutely.
That we are not adding someone, we're moving.
Yeah. And for those people who maybe haven't tuned in recently, this is something that historically I haven't been providing this in my report. It's something that I've been updating the board on kind of like a couple of times a year basis. We felt like it was important to have that as an ongoing piece that I bring every month. It started last month in the month of October. There is no change to the FTE chart from the October to November, with the exception of one of the special education aids that I mentioned earlier. And we are funding that through our ESSER funding, not through our general fund. So other than that, the FTE chart is up to date and is for the November. And that's going to continue to be something that I bring forward every month to the board. And it'll be in that section as well.
Garth, I didn't
Yes.
see it when I printed the agenda out. Did it come on later on? Is it out there now?
Yes, all of this, the FTE chart is on board docs. And there was a question earlier about that. Maybe there was some sort of a glitch. There was a question by an audience member about not necessarily not being able to see this month's, but last month's, which was there. There isn't any change. It is there now. But maybe if you just happen to try again, I don't know if there was some sort of issue with.
There is an issue with board docs.
Oh,
That's
okay.
why the forecast can't be seen.
Oh, okay.
Would it
So-
be worthwhile, it's not maybe the perfect place for it, but would it be worthwhile to put it on Rob's page?
Yeah, I have no issue where we put it. Usually the common section for a business meeting for me is in that HR section. And I think that's where people would probably most likely go.
Right.
I'm fine to keep it there. If the board would like it to go into a different section, I would be
Well,
glad to do that.
I think Rob has tried to make his page a kind of information central,
Okay,
and it's an easy place to go for a lot of things. It's just a suggestion, really up to.
No, I think it's fine.
Yeah, I think it'd be probably best if they discuss before we just say do it. Make sure that it's where it can be updated when it needs to be updated. I have no problem with it being there. It's sometimes you put things out in a certain spot and then it remains static because nobody can get to
I
it.
recommend we talk about it on Tuesday at our meeting and decision and inform the board where it'll be so everybody knows.
Right. And the purpose really is just, it's real time. It's real time. It's FTEs. It's what we look at every day. There's somebody had mentioned the discrepancy with ODE and ours. ODE, they pull different data. I don't know if you want to address that tonight, or we could even explain it.
Yeah, yeah. So there was a request for some information of why the FTE chart that I have with the number of
Right.
teachers is different from there isn't an ODE for this particular school year. But if you look at last year, which is on the chart,
Right.
and why they don't match up, and that has to do with the teacher code that's selected, and not getting into a bunch of the weeds, but how you code a teacher in EMIS and whatever it is that the state wants to grab to call teachers. It depends. The group that they grab is only certain codes. And for example, one of the differences for us is that our reading teachers are not coded the same as a classroom teacher. And so when ODE grabs quote teachers, it's not including those in there. But I'm getting that information. We basically have to then start looking through lists and trying to find where the differences are.
And there's reasons simply because OD, if they want to report class size, you're not putting in certain positions. And that's why the more accurate, you'll see more FTEs on our report. It's every employee, and that's how we're reporting.
Right.
If you've ever been a data analyst in your life, one of the things that you learned fairly quickly is to try to go to only one report.
Yeah.
Get as few reports as possible, because I mean, it is like Holy Grail day if you have two reports and you get them to match.
Well, if I could eliminate OD's report, I'd do it. But
In all
But
seriousness,
any of you
it
that
can be frustrating, honestly.
Right.
Because
Any
if
of you that-
somebody
that-
wants to just basically, let's get down to the facts, right? It can be frustrating that ODE puts out on the CUP report and it'll just say the word teachers. And then, of course, the FTE chart that I have will also say teachers because they're a teacher.
Yep.
But the EMIS code is different, and I believe that we have them coded appropriately.
correct. Yes.
And all districts, that's the case. You know what I mean? Of decisions on how they're coding them. So it can be frustrating to try to compare apples to apples And certainly I can understand why it'd be frustrating for someone in our community to be looking at the FTE chart that we are now presenting every month and then looking at an ODE report and saying, hey, what are the discrepancies? I think it's a good question, and I'm going to try to answer as best I can to clear up the end.
Thanks.
Some of that have to do with like Title I funding and how different positions are paid and
In some
funds
cases,
received.
yes. In this particular case, no, for the reading teacher piece. In terms of how those folks get paid, it is a difference. In terms of the count, intervention specialists in the particular report that the question was raised, they are included, but reading teachers were not included. It also, some of our folks, I try to keep our chart as updated and exact as possible. For example, if there is a teacher who's on a leave of absence and they are an employee of ours and we're just filling it with a substitute, and the substitute who's not necessarily hired by us, but through Sub Solutions County, there's a discrepancy there because the person who is on leave, that is, I'm saying that there is a spot that is basically, it's a spot there. So I'm holding it because I don't want it to look like we're adding a bunch of people back when people are just on leave. We have that person covered, but it's through a sub. But when the state grabs the number, the substitute is not on the EMIS list. So then it's the number. There are lots of things that go into it. It can be confusing. And I understand why people would be frustrated with it.
Well, and it just continues, because if you go into something like looking at expenditures Rob, help me here, I think 21 and 22 and part of 23, if you look at expenditures, bracket them by looking at expenditures in 18 and 19 and 20. And then you look at it, forecasted expenditures in 24, 25 and beyond. What you see is something that looks like this, and then it comes back up again. What's going on? Well, you have to look really into the detail.
Right.
And you actually have to look at different line items to understand that's because people are being paid for out of an ESSER account, not the general account. And then when the ESSER money runs out, they come back up to the general line.
Which, of course, is a nuance that we haven't really had because there wasn't ESSER money before
Right.
COVID. So it's just an added layer of nobody is trying to hide anything. We're trying to have everything out there for people. But there are legitimate questions. And, between Judy and myself, when we get these types of questions, we basically, like, hey, that's a good question. Let's start to take a look and go through and see who is it? Why are the totals different? And what is the coding? And are we doing it appropriately or not? And it's just a process of figuring out the information and then sharing it back. But I get it. It's frustrating to me. Believe me, I wish that there was a system where I was in real time putting in a number and it reflects on ODE. The other issue is that ODE's information is always a year old, right? Because EMIS reporting happens on a yearly basis throughout the year, and they can only put out information that's from the school year prior, which can be frustrating to community members as well, because we're in the current year, but the questions of the things that are posted are from the previous year.
You remember the term Y2K?
Yeah.
Yeah. So companies like SAP sold billions and billions of dollars of software, not just because of Y2K, but because companies are sick and tired of the problem that you're talking about. And the promise of those kinds of systems was that you had essentially one database. So all the numbers on all the reports were going to be the same. But that's still not the world necessarily for education and lots of other places. So.
Any other questions about either the FTE chart or this first part of the HR recommendation?
Okay, can we vote on that then?
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Dr. Schwetzenow,
Yes.
Mr. Doherty,
Yep. Yes.
Reverend Eiler,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz.
Yes. Motion carried. There is a second human resource employment recommendation, and even though it says two, because it's the second one, there's just one person on it. I will simply explain that the reason this is separated out is that person hired for a 3-hour student activity monitor happens to be my son-in-law, and so I need to abstain. According to the lawyer, I legally don't have to abstain, but that one abstain on an issue like that. So I didn't want to abstain on the whole human resources recommendation, so there is a second one that we need a motion on.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Whichever way you want to do that, Dr. Swetchnow and Mr. Doherty, I heard both at the same time. Questions about that?
Garth, because Kathy raised the question,
Mhm.
you want to confirm for us that there was no undue influence in the selection of this person?
No, there isn't. This is a 3-hour position, student activity monitor at the middle school, monitoring students in the cafeteria and/or outside on recess once they finished eating. This historically is a position that some of our bus drivers, most of our student activity monitors are bus drivers because that's a time when they're not driving a bus. If they don't have a midday route, they have a break in between the AM route and the PM route. And the majority of those spots are our bus drivers. This particular position was open because of a resignation, and it was out there, and Mr. Baker applied. I talked to Dr. Lorenz about it. We checked with legal just to make sure, hey, what's the most? And yes, he is doing a great job. We are very happy to have him. He's been a great addition.
All right, can we vote on that then?
Mr. Doherty,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Abstain.
Dr. Schwetznow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Garth, it's a little bit off the topic, but you mentioned bus drivers.
Yes.
What's the bus driver situation looking like right now?
It's the same as it was last month. We don't have any, there isn't a recommendation for a new hire of a bus driver. There is an extended leave of absence for one bus driver in the previous section, but that bus driver has been out prior to this. It's just an extension of the leave. So it's status quo being that we are still in need of drivers. Since the school year has started, we have lost drivers, and we are now down to, I think, just 2 subs, because we hire, for transportation, we hire our own subs so early in the morning when they need to report to work. And we, of course, keep our subs busy all the time. We have had to have routes already this year, and we will most likely have to continue with some of the folks that work in the transportation department having to run routes.
Getting ready to throw in the towel?
No, we are never ready to throw in the towel, Mr. Doherty. It is a problem that is statewide, but I am never going to throw in the towel because we need to get these kids to school. And for some of our families, they're not able to get kids to school, and we have to keep trying everything we can to employ folks to make sure to get the job done.
Who was it that said failure is not an option? So you'll get this done. You will get this done.
I think it was Kevin Doherty.
There were multiple workshops at the OSBA about bus drivers' strategies, just indicating again that this is a statewide problem. If you listen to Cincinnati news, figuring out how they're going to run kids on city buses, and yeah, it's,
You find a way.
yeah, challenging. By the way, that number is always on FTE sheet as well. So
The bus driver.
you see it monthly.
Yes.
Okay, the next item is a letter of agreement with OC Local 363. I'll make that motion, and then Mr. Collier can talk to us about it if there's a second.
Second.
You two are on a,
I should look
Kevin's.
over. I didn't hear anything.
All right, if you could explain that letter to us briefly.
This is the same agreement with a minor change that we also had last year. Finding substitutes for our teachers has been an issue. It has been an issue that has started prior to COVID, has been accelerated by COVID. It still continues to be an issue of finding substitutes. The state of Ohio did relax their requirements for someone to be a substitute teacher, which did help. And this simply is an agreement with our OPC staff, that's our classified staff, that if we are unable to find a substitute and there was a paraprofessional or an aide that was already assigned a particular classroom and we cannot find a substitute, just like we would have a teacher who might give up their plan bell to go cover a math class, let's say at the high school, because we were short. The person gets a little bit of an extra pay. This is basically allowing our paraprofessionals, for our classified staff to be able to do that. We did it last year. Last year, it happened quite often. I would say maybe a couple of, maybe one or two per day. The need for this hasn't been the same need as it has been in the past. We're trying to be proactive with it becoming flu season and it becoming winter. And we just want to make sure that if we do need to utilize this because of a shortage of subs, we've got it ready.
Any questions? All right, can we vote on that?
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Mr. Darty,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Dr. Schwechnow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Motion carried. You have way too many items.
I know, I'm really sorry.
The next item that we need a motion for is additional supplementals to the LEA contract. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
It's Eric's.
I was waiting for him.
We've got a motion and a second. Tell us just briefly about this one, Mr. Collier.
So what this is, I just want to make sure to remind, there was a $50,000 donation a number of months ago that the youth lacrosse program donated to the district. And that was to be able to get the middle school lacrosse program up and running. And earlier, at an earlier board meeting, we said, yes, that is something that we want to accept the donation and work with that group to get this started. The athletic director at the middle school has done the work. The supplemental committee has done its work in appropriately placing these positions in the supplemental area that is most applicable. And I'm just bringing it to, that committee's role is to make the recommendation for the board, who has to actually have an addition if it's not during a negotiation, which right now we are not in an open negotiation. So just bringing it to the board so we can utilize that $50,000 and start our middle school kids this spring with a lacrosse program for boys and girls.
Questions? All right, Mr. Giuffre.
Mrs. Washburn. Yes. Reverend Eilert. Yes. Mr. Darty,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Schwechnow.
Yes.
Motion carried. And then we have a high school boys lacrosse team trip. Can we have a motion for that?
So moved.
Mr. Doherty?
Second.
Second from Dr. Swetchenow. And this is a typical,
Yes.
there will be travel for the team for competition. This is handled by either the team or the kids traveling, the students traveling. It's not an expense, but it requires board approval for the travel to take place.
Yep. The one thing I want to make sure to note that everybody knows that it is not district funds that are used for this. It is through fundraising and through the boosters and or parents paying. And just exactly what you said, Dr. Lorenz, is true. We just have to make sure that we bring it to the group because anytime there's an out-of-state travel, the board needs to approve that.
Questions? Mr. Giuffre?
Mr. Darty,
Yes.
Dr. Schwechnow,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert. Yes. Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes. Motion carried. I'm going to make the motion to approve the high school Washington DC trip. Is there a second?
So moved.
Mr. Doherty seconded, just
Or second, sorry.
It's fine. It's a motion to second, so you can move.
Sounds like a neat trip.
It does. I will just tell you, I called Mr. Collier when this, checking it tonight. I said, there appear to be some different dates on there. There was November 8th, 2023, and then there was November 9th, 2021, and then there was November 10th, 2022. And I said, so are they going to DC or are they doing time travel?
Yeah.
So it's correct
Yeah,
now for the dates. But
The company that produced the document that you're reviewing, there were some errors in the dates. It is for the future, not in the past. They're not time traveling. This is for seniors for next school year. And as historically here in Loveland, eighth graders make a trip to go to Washington, DC. The trip was canceled when these particular students were in eighth grade because COVID hit. So Mr. Reed has been working with that particular class to try to come up with, hey, what can we do? And next year, what they are planning on doing is, so those kids aren't missing out. A number of years later, they're going to be able to have their Washington, DC trip. Same thing, no district funds. Parents, if students are going, parents would be paying. And this is just an itinerary to make sure that you guys approve of the out-of-town trip. So then they can start making their plans and getting this information out to the current juniors, which will be seniors.
Very good, thank you. Any questions? Mr. Giuffre?
Dr. Lorenz.
Yes.
Mr. Darty.
Yes.
Reverend Eilert.
Yes.
Dr. Schweitzer.
Yes.
And Mrs. Washburn.
Yes. Motion carried. I think the final one for your report, Mr. Collier, is the
That's it.
school calendar. Is there a motion to approve the 23-24 school calendar?
So moved.
Mrs. Washburn moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Reverend Eilert. We had a first reading of this in October, so this is the second reading. And then this will get posted on the website, approved, but so far it's been minutes for people to look at.
That's
People
correct.
have been asking.
I know they're asking.
People plan ahead and they
Yes.
know what the school.
Yeah, if you guys don't have any questions. It's an identical proposal to the one. There wasn't any feedback that I had been given from the first reading. And I worked on this with the LEA and OPC leadership to begin with. So we are all on the same page for the school calendar for next year. And hopefully tonight it will be approved and we can get it out to folks so they can plan accordingly.
And I think you reminded us last month, this is following that process of half of the school population comes on the first day and the other half the second
Yes.
day, that rolling start.
Yeah, that staggered start will continue. We had very positive feedback from this current school year. And that is something that we're looking at for next school year, which is in this calendar as well. Thanks for
Thank
pointing it out.
Any questions? Mr. Giuffre?
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Reverend Eilert.
Yes.
Mr. Darty.
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz.
Yes.
Schweitzer.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you.
Yep.
Now we move to the treasurer's report, and he has several items under there as well. Would you prefer also, Mr. Giuffre, that we have motions on each item and then we have reports during them, or do you have a report you want to start with?
Well, I think Mr. Darty has a question or two he wants to ask me so that I can address it earlier. We can do that whenever,
Are you ready?
I definitely am.
All right, so we'll start with that then.
So I think the first question was the amount of money that we have with meter and the rates of return that we're seeing from meter.
And specifically, I mean, the market, the time that money was put into the market, it was bottom of the market. So we're receiving the amount of money. And then this is a nice thing about a bond. The moment that you make that investment, you know exactly what your return is going to be. The purpose of the investment is to hold the investment security. So we're receiving the rates that were available at the time the investments were made. Was there a question about the amount of money that was
I
invested?
believe so.
Because the amount of money that was invested was based upon our cash flow.
Right.
And so it was an appropriate amount to be able to be within what the cash flow has been projected within the forecast. The ending balance of the fiscal year is not representative of the low point. That would be January, as Dr. Schweitzer now pointed out. And so we can't overextend ourselves. We need to have the fluidity of being able to have it available. It is not appropriate to invest in something with the anticipation of realizing that principal prior to that maturity. And in this case, we would not receive all our principal back if we were to try to sell the investment at this time. So we're receiving what we had invested at that time at the rate we're receiving it. So that is, and at some point in time in the future, if we have additional revenues, we will reevaluate what our portfolio will look like going forward.
And I'll just reiterate the last point that you made. We're no longer putting more money into investments we see that our cash balance is dwindling and it was not an appropriate use for reserve funds at this.
Right.
So my recollection, which could be flawed on this, was that we started with something around 8 million at meter.
Yes, and part of that was in commercial paper. Commercial paper has a short life.
Right.
And so that has matured. And so we're down to the 6 million and some.
And the 6 million is basically treasuries. And if my recollection is correct, meter feathered it out with varying maturities.
Yes.
But despite that, we're in the 150 basis point kind of.
Yes, and it is a laddered bond, or it's a laddered portfolio. So short-term treasuries, long-term bonds. Mhm.
In the case of Sims, they had started this at a higher market than we did. And it's a little regrettable that we're not participating in the current treasury market. But having said that, our cash needs going forward are tighter than they were when we put the 8 million in. So the amount of money that you'd be able to commit and still have free cash to meet obligations is a lower amount than where we were.
Well, and
a year and a half
also
ago.
our options are quite limited. We are restricted by Ohio Revised Code. So there's no gambling here. This is a very safe return on investment and backed by the full faith and credit of the federal government.
So what are treasuries doing today? A couple of hundred basis points?
Significantly more than the point in time when, yes,
I think they're around that.
it is.
So we wish there was more, but I think you've adopted a little bit of a more conservative position given our cash concerns.
And as you had pointed out when I arrived, that a lot of this money was sitting in Star Ohio. And so the return was significantly higher than what Star Ohio was offering. Rates go down a lot quicker than they go up. And so we are receiving return on what we have invested, and we have no risk of losing principal unless our cash flow projections are not correct.
Right. And just to be clear about this, we're no longer actually with meter, right?
We are, so the funds are in US Bank. That is the custodian for the account. And those ACAT transfers take a while. And so this month they should be moving to Fifth Third to hold, but Fifth Third will not receive any compensation for holding those. So.
Will they hold the treasuries for us?
Yes.
So we're still invested. We're just not using meter as an agent.
And paying them.
And paying them the
Yes.
50 basis points?
I think it was 10.
10 basis, sorry.
At one time it was 50, when you could make that much.
So I don't know if that answered those questions.
Will be. Yeah, I have that. If you want to, can you email me so I have your email address? Off the top of my head?
Okay,
Yeah,
so
Let's
this didn't go where I wanted it to go.
Conversation to the board.
So I think the problem is you don't have the meter report here.
It's
That
on,
gave us-
it's on the site, but he's asking for the projection of the portfolio. That's a different number. And I have that, but I would prefer to. I mean, I'd be happy to-
I will tell you for the purposes of transparency, it's not an eye-popping number because I want to say it was in the $30,000 range because we're getting 100 basis points on treasuries and the money is tied up in that. But it's what we were able to get by law. So I think it was 30-ish grand, 35 grand, right? Last time we talked about it.
I have to go back and look to know the exact number, and I don't know why anybody would expect any of us to have the exact number for projected balance in our head. Question we were prepared for, which quite honestly I find disturbing. But at any rate, the point was This investment was made because it was a significant increase in return over what we had been receiving.
Which was basically nothing.
And in the interest of fiscal responsibility, we're trying to increase the value of our cash holding.
Right.
And if we continued to have enough excess cash to continue to invest at this point, we certainly would.
Okay, and then the second question is the TIF from Sims.
Yes.
Could you explain that situation?
Well,
More to it than,
there is, but I'll try to give the short version. So there is a history with this TIF. This is money that the district has never received, and part of the issue with commercial properties being a stream of alternate revenue. This property was TIFed for original purposes, and then the monies were used for other purposes, and there was a lawsuit and all this kind of stuff. But the TIF ended.
so Rob, just for the public's benefit, a
Yes.
TIF is kind of like an abatement, right?
It is the use of tax monies for the purpose of infrastructure and purposes that would help for community investment for these commercial properties, which do not provide students to the district to be able to afford parking lots and parking lights and sewers and all
Infrastructure.
things. Infrastructure, yes. And so the short story on this was last year, on the day of our board meeting in November, I received a letter from, dated November 18th, 2021, from the township administrator asking the board to extend the existing TIFs. And with that, that we would then be able to participate for the first time in properties. That number is just under $400,000, but I still have to verify that with the county because we were asked to invoice the township. The original letter from the township administrator said that the property had a value of approximately $840,000. Loveland should have the lion's share of that. When I did the math, based upon the numbers that I received at the rate, it's just under $400,000. So in the process of putting the forecast, I called the county auditor or emailed the county auditor to get the amount of revenue that would be generated so that I could invoice the township administrator. And this is in October 10th or 11th. And what I received back was that neither one of the extensions had not been filed on there's three parcels. Of the three parcels, the two extensions had not been filed, and there was never a TIF on the one parcel. So I forwarded that information to the township, administrator about 10 days ago. And I think it was a surprise to them because they, I think, maybe thought that it had been filed. So the reason it's not in the forecast is because if it is a TIF, it's a different line item. And there also would be a resolution of the board to direct those funds to whichever fund the board deems appropriate by whatever proportion of those monies that the board would want those funds to be in. If it is actually tax money and that the TIF was not filed in a timely manner, and we're going to receive those funds then through normal process, then we would,
tax revenues.
as tax revenues, then they would go into three different funds. And at that point in time, I would know where to project those. The total amount that we're talking about is 75 basis points, 0.75%. So it's not material. It's a nice number, but
75 basis points of what?
0.75%.
No, I
Of the entire revenues that we receive.
Okay.
So $398,000 was my calculation. So 400,000. And so once I know what it's going to be called, we'll put it into
I hear
the,
you saying is it's not in the budget because we don't know what the number is.
That's-
We don't know when or how
correct.
but our anticipation is that we will.
Yes. And
we're aware of it.
yes, and then when we know, I will put it in. The forecast itself is very solid, and it is a requirement for us to file it by the end of this month. But it does not prohibit us from modifying the forecast as we go forward. In fact, part of the reason that the deadline was changed from the end of October to the end of November is because something happens in November that could change it quite a bit. So they decided to make it easier on all of us by delaying it by a month. So as soon as we know, I will let you know. Might be a good discussion on the 10th, and I hope by then we'll have it resolved.
Okay, so it's for the benefit of the public and Rick, it's good news. It's not life-changing news, but it's a good thing. and it's not an insignificant amount of money. It will help. And if we get all the details squared away, hopefully we'll start to see it when, next year?
Yes, it would be, should be next, yes, it will be in next year, one way or another. Mhm.
There's a lot of gory details that nobody really wants to get into about the origin of this thing and what it's really all about. I think suffice it to say that there's tax money that we think we're due. Sims agrees with that. And we're going to start to get some money on properties that are in the district that we haven't been getting property tax revenues from historically.
Am I allowed to say finally? No?
You've been here for the long haul.
Okay,
All right.
thank you for that.
Thank you.
That's what I had.
Okay, so then we could start on the financial reports. So we could start with a motion to accept the October 2022 financial reports.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Questions on those? Those are on board docs. Reconciliation, cash summary, amended appropriations, bank statement, the investment portfolio.
So the meter report is out there now? It wasn't when I looked earlier.
Yes,
Okay, sorry.
It's no longer the meter report.
both
It's-
US Bank and the meter is there with the
Okay.
positions currently held.
I print all this stuff off in the morning, and I guess this showed up later in the day.
And just as a point, I wasn't sure if we're talking about fiscal year 2022 or so whatever you want to know, I can get them. Thank you very much. Treasurer at lovelandschools.org. I almost said it.
Talk too much about Great Oaks this evening. Okay, anything else on that? We vote?
Mr. Doherty?
Yep, yes.
Sorry. Dr. Schwetchino?
Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz?
Yes.
And Mrs. Washburn?
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carried. I think we should just have you continue with YEP all the way. That's your vote now.
I don't know. I'm
No.
getting too relaxed here, I think.
Okay, all right.
Is it time to leave this job?
Oh, I thought you meant it's the time to leave this meeting. We're getting close.
Maybe
The
we
next
are.
item, I will move to accept a donation, $25,000. There a second?
Second.
Mrs. Washburn seconded. Any discussion on this, either Mr. Giuffre or Mr. Broadwater?
I know Mr. Bryant, our athletic director, is working with our athletic boosters. They have the donations go through the school district so that we could fund it appropriately. Mr. Giuffre, the project that Rich was talking about with the $25,000.
This is for equipment that he identified with, and what Rich has done is they've struck an accord with the association. Instead of them buying
Right.
on our behalf, they're giving the money to the district, donating it to the district to make the purchases so that we truly own it by donating the funds. So this was the result, I believe, of a 7-hour meeting on a Saturday.
Right, right.
And I think the purchase he needed was 50,000. This is half of what.
Right.
Questions? All right, Mr. Giuffre.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Mr. Doherty,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Dr. Schwetchino.
Yes.
Motion carried. The next item is interesting. I will just say that not only is not, the attachment is not on board docs. When you click on the resolution on board docs, there's nothing there.
And I actually put another item out there, put everything back out, thinking that maybe it was just, I don't know what it is. This is a board docs issue. It's
I mean, on
frustrating.
our printed agenda, the piece of paper
Mhm.
and what we handed out at the meeting, there is an item for us to accept the fiscal '23 forecast. But when you click on that on board docs,
It's
there's a
not
big
there.
white space.
Yeah.
Not only is there not the attachment, there's not the resolution.
And it appears as though there's an attachment on the left-hand side in board docs, just like the financial reports, but I don't, and I'll have to give them a call tomorrow and find out what's going on. They made a change to the platform, I think, last month. But this is, I don't know why that is the one.
So how do we, before we make a motion on this, how do we see, I realize this
Yes.
in November, how do we see what we are approving?
So There is no change from the previous forecast with regards to the assumption. There's only the fact that ended, and I've added a year on the end of it. And the forecast is not required to be approved by the board to file. So I could file the forecast and have the board ratified on the 10th if that would be.
I said we weren't going to have any agenda items on that.
Then
Retreat anymore.
I can file and it can be, the board can ratify in January. Or I can file and then we can refile in January.
I was just looking back to see, can you tell me when it was? The actual forecast, was it actually in an attachment?
It was under public content as an attachment. And if you are signed in and you hit edit, it comes up.
For
Okay.
tonight's meeting,
Mm-hmm. It was.
going there right now.
Hit edit. I don't know
yeah.
that we have, I don't know that board members have an edit capability.
So I just added it again and now I see two of them under edit. And when I hit it, it
Oh, I
comes up.
see an attachment.
Do you see it in the content?
I don't, I'm
Right,
not,
It doesn't show up in the content.
no, I see the attachment though on the right-hand side,
Right.
but it's not.
And I was able to pull it up under edit. I don't know why it's not coming up.
Well, as I said, I
Can you-
don't believe that board members have an edit
Um,
capability.
Can you drop it into the share folder and then we can put it up on the screen? Would that work?
I can do that.
This is strange. I see that it's showing that it,
Yep.
Is the file not on your site anywhere? Is it, you said?
Not before the board approves it.
Okay. Is the last one there?
Yes.
So can we look at that?
The last one's on the board, Department of Education's website. The one from May.
Would it be appropriate for Rob to go ahead and file it, as that has to be done in November? And then we can review this with our loan agenda item?
Well, I mean, we may, if we're discussing anything financial in December, we may be looking at it. I'm concerned about the actual approval of it. You're saying that it can be filed without a board resolution?
Yes.
And then we can have a board resolution at a later date.
Yes.
Um,
um,
I'm sending it to you all in email. Technology is wonderful when it works.
Are we trying to put it up on, please repeat
I
for me
dropped it into the file. I don't
what's
know.
changed?
Nothing has changed with regards to the assumptions. The only thing that's actual for 2022 fiscal year and added the next year out.
Oh, okay.
so
So
I had looked at the
2027,
last month and it was very, very close to the forecasted.
yes. We looked at the differences in Finance Committee last month.
Okay, so I'm just looking at what you sent us.
I put it, oh, yes, but I put it, dropped in that folder, but I'll email. Very good.
So I'm looking at a November 2022 5-year forecast. And all of this, you're assuring us, is the same as the May, except for the actual ending
You get it.
month of
Not
2022.
identical, but the same with regards to,
It was very close. I'd looked at the individual data earlier.
there it is.
So you're saying 2027 is added as
Yes.
Yes,
the bar,
you can see 2027 here now.
bar goes lower.
And I just want to ask a question. The way the format is set up, the way
All the way to the end. Is
the way the way this information is requested, there's a line that says ending balance with renewal new levies. But what I'm seeing on here is the same when you go further down and it says without renewal. So there was no levy money projected
Correct.
in this budget, in this forecast.
Yes.
So there was no need to make a change with the failure of the levy last week.
Correct.
Okay. Those numbers are big enough to see, because I can't see it on my phone.
You want to slide just a little bit more down? You can see the end results. So 2027 is what was added, and the actual results from 2022 are there.
And that looks to me as a 3.7% increase over the last month, I'm sorry, the last year that we had looked at, which was 26, correct?
Okay. Does everybody see what's available up there?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's 24 is when ESSER funds must be utilized, and therefore you'll see a little bit of an increase because we no longer have ESSER funds.
Very little, because we're not using much of that remaining ESSER funds for personnel. I think it's 5 positions, Stacy. Yeah. And then there's whatever John has for HVAC. Yeah. Yeah, but it will be paid out of ESSER. It won't come out of here. It's not on the forecast. Yeah.
And assumptions, state funding are constant over that time, even no guarantee of.
And I'll say this, thank you for teeing that up for me. I'll say this, it has to be measurable and probable. It is probable that we are going to have less money coming from the state, but right at this moment, it's not measurable. It won't be until the next. And that's my, thank you for allowing me to give my disclaimer.
Rob, we talked about this earlier, but the impact of ESSER, excuse me, the impact of ESSER on 21 and 22. I thought you were going to footnote that in here. I know it had been footnoted in earlier forecast before you.
Oh.
The 21 forecast, as I recall, had it noted in there. Were you planning on adding notes about it in here?
Well, I can. The thing about that is ESSER is a different fund.
Than the general.
1 million that came back in to the account or to the general fund, those additional expenditures are in the salaries and benefits.
Right. I think that the part that's, one of the parts that's confusing in all of this is what I call the artificial depression of 21 and 22's expenses because they were booked to the ESSER accounts. And I understand that ESSER is not general. That's exactly the point here. But I wonder if it'd be informative to people to have a note so they can look at the 21 and 22 and even the 20 numbers.
On that page, it shows what the difference is. It just doesn't identify it as expenditures that were previously paid out of. It says this is the change in, this is the influx.
You're on
It shows it going out and it shows it coming in. It's on
the
page
personnel or the
14,
total?
page 14 for personnel services and 15 for benefits. It shows the reduction in 2021, which is 9.09%, and shows it coming back in at 7.53% in 2022. And the thing about 1% is it's still an increase. It just looks, it's less of an increase, but it is in the bars at the bottom.
So when I look at a 9% decrease in 21 over 20, that's all, well, that's the 2.7 ESSER number in there. So if it was apples to apples, that would flip from negative up to positive, right?
If the expenditures had been made out of the general fund, yes.
That was kind of the purpose for my question, was simply in a lot of the discussions I was having, the increase in the expenditures, people were not understanding.
Yeah, Adam, could you go to page of 14? So we can all see that. It's
5
Getting
more
there.
up.
page numbers in the lower right there. That's it, I think, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So that big decrease, the third bar over,
Yes. That's ESSER.
that's ESSER.
Now, here's the thing about the narrative here is that one of the misconceptions was, well, you've got the expenditure there, but where's the dollars and cents? That's, again, because it's in a different fund. It's in a federal grant, all of those expenditures and all of those revenues. So
Yeah, if you-
this shows the decrease in expenditures as a result of ESSER and an increase once it comes back in to the, yeah.
Yeah, I know none of you are interested in doing some of the stuff that I do, but if, this report that Rob gives us every month, it's part of the cash reconciliation. Actually, these are funds. You actually see ESSER, and it shows the money coming in, and it shows the money going out. The general fund is the first line normally look at for operating expenses.
So to go back to the original question, is there a problem with referencing something like 2021 expenditures were affected by the use of ESSER funds? Is that?
I'll just say, as a previous auditor and a long-term treasurer, the challenge there for me is that this truly was a supplant grant. And up to this point, you've never been able to say that, meaning that we actually were supplanting the expenditures as a result of an epidemic. And that is a little counterintuitive for me, but I will be happy to add the dollars and cents to say this is a result of government's support during this period of time.
I wasn't even asking for dollars and cents, just a note there that references the fact that there's a dip there
Mhm.
because of something. I don't know that it needs to be, and that's why I asked if it was a problem, because I do understand that there are things that auditors look at and things that treasurers look at that are more meticulous, more specific than what a non-accountant like me would look at.
Yeah.
That's why I asked if there was a problem with putting that note.
No, there's not a problem. The challenge with the ESSER money was that we received the ESSER money and we received notice of the ESSER money before we actually received full
Money.
details about how we could use it.
Yeah.
But I think that would be appropriate to do. I'd be happy.
See, there are some districts who will not see it because they didn't use it as a plant grant, they used it as an ad grant.
That's true.
The
Yeah.
reason we have the anomaly is because it was used to supplant, which made sense financially.
Which means that some districts paid it out as cash bonuses.
And still
For
are.
example,
Right.
we took people that were doing work, and from a financial perspective, we used this money to cover their compensation. And that is legit
Yes,
from a federal grant perspective.
yes. The folks
But
that
not completely, as there is other things within that grant money that were required, like
Yes.
learning loss catch-up, which led to the summer program.
Yes.
The, I have a question. I want to make sure that you guys fully fleshed out what you're.
Go ahead.
I'm fine, yeah.
So looking back at both the personnel services, page 14, employees benefits, page 15, we've talked about this before. 2021, 2022 shows the biggest, anomalies. Can you go over why 23 is higher on both of those? Is that because half of the school year still has some ESSER trickling through? That a calendar,
if we're looking at the bars at the bottom, 1% of 1%, if you go up to the bars above as benefits percentage of total expenditure, and you see the dollars and cents, that tells you what the actual increases are. So you see the line on the top of those, if you were to draw it from the left to the right, you have a pretty good picture of where the dip is and why, but you get back to the normal trajectory in 2023 through 2027. The bars at the bottom show the percentage of that increase, and it's relevant result of one year to the next. The bars show the actual dollars and cents.
And well, and your bars on 24 through 27, I realize that's just a projection, are flat. So there still is a difference if you look at 23.
So if you have the flat bars in the same picture with the dollars and cents, it gives a perspective. The percentages are more relevant once we get back to the normal spending pattern. And those then would be representative of our normal 8% projection on insurance, and then the impact of retirement as a percent of the salaries.
Well, and so this then goes back to the next question. So your projection, and we've talked about this before, is that we're looking at a roughly 3.5% increase in personnel costs over time going into the future.
Correct.
Unless something changes significantly with our ability to control those in some way.
Yes.
And the same thing with our benefits, significantly more expensive on benefits than personnel costs, but historically, that's been a conservative but reliable number.
It is, and it is.
I know that if you look back at the recent past, it's much less reliable.
So the percentage that's applied to the salaries and benefits would be a 14%. That's SCRS, STR. The percentage applied to the insurance piece of the benefits would be 8%. Some years it's 12, some years it's 2, but last year it was 8. And so that is a higher percentage overall, but it's lower starting, a lower value, the dollars and cents on benefits. But it's a combination of those two. 2% for dental and life.
I think if you look at 2019, your expenditures are 32.5, right? Then in 2022, you're basically there again, 32.7. That's a course of 1, 2, 3 years where staff expenditures are just catching up because of all the staff cuts that were there. So I think it's important to remember that as well. You can't forget that's an adjustment, and that's why it looks the way it does.
Interesting, I pulled up the November of 20 and May of 21, November of 21, May of 22 forecasts, and looked at how people at points in time saw the future. And it's really interesting that November of 20, I guess was Kevin did that forecast. He had us ending at 60,221,000 in 26. Rob has us ending 60,570,000. Kevin later that year, who started to get an inkling, I believe, of ESSER, still forecasted us out at 59,160,000. So, you know, what you read into this is the anticipation, ESSER coming in and ESSER leaving us, and return to underlying growth rates. I bring you back to the presentation I made at the last meeting. That was totally respective of Rob's assumptions, right? And just looked at revenue growth of 1% per year, which I think is a pretty realistic number, and expense growth per year of 2.5%, which is a reasonably conservative number, and you end up deteriorating our cash position below what I call the thresholds at about the same time as Rob's, I'll call it more sophisticated forecast ended up with. So that was my way of, kind of cross-checking his assumptions and, his math with some pretty high-level stuff that I think is reasonable. So the bottom line of all of that is that I think our discussion in December is a really needed one. We're going to have a cash problem in the foreseeable future, and we're going to have to figure out what to do about it.
Well, and but more importantly, and why I brought that up, our historical average increase is 3% for personnel, and we've got budget at 3.5%, and our numbers don't work that way. I mean, we've chewed through $5 million in 4 years, from 23 to 27, just in the personnel increase alone.
Yeah.
So we have difficult conversations to have in December.
Yeah, my bet is that we don't end up forecasting.
Yeah. Okay. Good, thanks.
All right, so just to be clear, we have seen the forecast that we are being asked to have a resolution about, that we don't totally have to have a resolution about, but it's on our agenda and we can have a resolution.
So moved.
But just one thing before we have a motion, no one currently looking at board docs. So it looks like there's an attachment there. It can't be seen at the moment. Currently, there is a forecast on the treasurer's website.
The forecast that existed before. Now, what I'll do is I'll send it to Andrew, if you could put it on my page.
So that's all I'm asking, is that this one will then, there will be gone. Is that correct? It'll be replaced?
Yes.
Or, no, it can
They
stay, then you can make a comparison.
No, it's better to have the current one on the page because
Okay.
the Department of Education has the past 10 years.
Okay, very good.
Or more.
That's all I was asking, is where it can be accessed. That's it.
You have the historical
I
bid.
Am I being asked to? only
No,
have-
you're not being asked.
Okay.
I'm confirming where people can find the information. That's all. Since it doesn't exist right now.
And I would prefer that you don't delete the previous forecasts that you have on the page.
That's actually what I was asking. Comparison.
We're also, I think we probably need to consolidate some, but we also have monthly forecasts or status, so cash position
Right.
as we progress throughout the year.
So I would move that the board accept the fiscal 23. Did you move it?
He did.
He did?
I was
Before-
premature in
well,
my movement.
Actually, he didn't
He
because
was
you hadn't
kidding.
called for them. Now you're calling for them.
All right, you can have it. Dr.
Thank you.
Swetchenow.
I would like to
moved
move that.
That we accept the forecast presented. And I'll second. All right.
And if anybody listening to this conversation is confused, we get it. What we're doing right now, correct me if I'm wrong, largely a procedural step.
Yes,
It's not an endorsement that this forecast is the forecast that we're,
but we did in fact see the forecast. In other words, I would have suggested we not vote on it, not been able to see the forecast. But since we can see it and it will be available to the public, then that's why I'm okay with the motion. Any other questions?
We'll be contacting board docs in the morning.
If it's not one thing, it's another.
Yeah, I
So,
apologize.
We have it all on video, though.
all right, Mr. Giuffre, can we vote?
Dr. Schwetchenow,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz.
Yes.
Mr. Darty,
yes.
Reverend Eiler,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carried. One more item. Hopefully we can get through that. There's a contingent authorization. So is there a motion to authorize the treasurer to transfer $180,000 contingency account to the transportation purchased services account?
I'll move it for the purposes of discussion.
Second.
Second by Reverend Eilert. Okay, discussion.
So John could probably elaborate more, but we have three factors that are involved here. Flux of need, students. We have an increase in cost of providers, and we have less of an ability to do this ourselves. And so we are literally at the mercy of our vendor. And this is, I don't know how you can expand beyond that, but it,
Say it in your words, please.
Yeah, I was going to say, need more information.
I tried.
So at the beginning of the year, we realized we were having quite an influx of students that needed to be transported either to alternate home sites. They are homeless children. We had pretty significant increase in special needs children that required transportation to a site that could assist them with their education. And I did not bring their spreadsheet with me, but a significant number of children. And with the reduction in number of buses that we have, or bus drivers that we have, we used to deliver these children to wherever it was that we needed to do it. We do not have the people to do that, provide that service anymore. We are, as we talked about, just barely able to get our own children, not our own, that's the wrong word. We are barely able to get the children to and from the schools in Loveland, let alone outside of the district. And the third item, as Rob said, are private contractors that provide the service of taking children to various locations. They are having the same problems that we have trying to find drivers. And they have the ability just to try to throw money at it to try to entice people to come and drive for them. That is not, that gets passed right straight along to us if we need that service. So obviously we need the service. We are unable to provide the service, plus we have more children that require the service. If we are able to bring some drivers back, we will be able to do some of these things, but I just don't see that happening too quickly.
So this is a.
So these are not, it's not simply, I think, doing a regular course of business, there might be a single student that needs a special. But these are also students that could have been transported on a regular school bus,
Yes.
but we do not have a driver that can take a single student or 2 or 3 students using a full school bus because we need them on the routes that we need that driver on the routes that we have.
Right. And the routes that we used to do, when we had the 2-tier, we did have a little bit of extra time. But now that we're doing the 3-tier, we are driving children from 7 until 6:30 until 9:30. So there's just no extra time available to provide it. And we're doing the same thing in the afternoon. Instead of having a 2-hour afternoon run, now we're having full 3-hour afternoon runs. We are, just getting off the subject, we're trying to figure out how to get children to athletic events because our buses don't get back to the 4 o'clock, 4.
So John, when I hear that, I think that there's the potential for your existing busing operation to actually be costing us less money at this point in time because you're using the assets more completely.
Yes.
So,
And there's significantly less drivers now
right.
performing functions because we don't provide our high school children. Thus, we don't do Moeller or Mount Notre
Right.
Dame.
So is the 180 incremental so let me say it differently. If our traditional busing program cost $1 million a year, I know it doesn't, but it's for the sake of argument, it was $1 million a year. And if we had these kids with the traditional busing program, with the capacity that we had, maybe it would have cost us $1.1 million, sake of argument, right? Now, it's not, the traditional base business is not costing us $1 million, it's costing us something less than $1 million because we've got really high levels of capacity and you don't have as many drivers. Is this 180 truly incremental? Or can you absorb part of this 180 in your existing transportation budget?
Not a true offset.
It isn't.
What's that?
It's not a true offset. We've got less drivers driving more, so they're getting paid more additional driving that they're doing. And this account, which is payroll and benefits, this is something that we didn't have last year that providing that.
Well, I understand the activity you didn't have last year. But I'm wondering if you had the budget to absorb this activity that you didn't have last year.
If we could hire our own drivers, we would be paying it out of payroll.
Yes. We built the budget around the number of drivers, around the number of drivers that we have. we did not build the budget around what we.
Okay, let me ask the question a different way. If I was asking you, how are you doing on your transportation budget, on your busing budget? What's the answer to that question?
I'd say we're doing pretty well.
By how much would you say?
I can't answer that.
Okay. Again, my point here is, if you've got favorability in your transportation budget, why don't you suck up part of this 180 in there and only charge the contingency for what you can't absorb?
So the numbers that we're talking about, 180,000 is in a completely different fund. So we are asking you to permit the use of funding to do that. If I had a balance left over in the transportation fund, then at the end of the year, we could
Offset.
But at this moment in time, I can't say, we're 2 months into it. And last year, we were doing 13,000, if you read the spreadsheet, we had $13,000 a month, or for 2 months, I can't remember what that number, $13,000 a month, and now we're almost, I believe, $35,000 a month.
Fuel?
No, for
these.
this contracted services.
Yeah, right.
And I don't have that spreadsheet in front of me, but it's more than doubled what we did last year.
What time period does this represent, the 100?
Well, what this means is that we've already depleted the budget that we had appropriated for this year based upon last year.
For this special service?
Yes, so this is.
For the remainder of this
adding to the
fiscal year?
Yes. Mhm. So it keeps us from gerrymandering the other budgets that are being used for personnel and benefits. This is a separate purchase services that we pay vendors.
So you established a contingency fund. You want to pull 180 out of that to fund this other account that is running negative or will run negative, right? Although you may end up the year, if I understand this correctly, you may end up the year with John's busing budget favorable.
Possibly, I don't know how, I mean, the amount of the situation from last year to this year, if you were to take the current period this year and the current period last year, the number of drivers
Decreased.
But
But the number of hours that we're driving has
not.
significant.
And so as a logistical
But that's
piece,
just a slightly different thing. And this is, I think it's news to me, so I think it's news to the rest of you as well, or else I was. Would it be acceptable for us to approve a transfer for half the amount that you're requesting, and then give us more information about what's going on, and so we understand it, going into the second half of the year? So we're going to
Jesse
think of,
can tell us about the number of students that we're talking about. He provides the children, or he offers the children to us, and then we.
He provides all the children to us. Jesse?
What I do.
Jesse, if you have the dollars, actually,
I have the children. He said I provide the children, not the
you can
dollars.
you can tell us the numbers of.
So
kids.
I could tell you, yes, just a little context to why he is asking for the money for the transportation piece. We currently have 11 students identified as homeless that we are providing transportation for. And we have currently 19 students that receive their services at other places because their needs extend beyond what we are able to provide here. You could say it was COVID, you could say whatever you want, but that number is significantly higher, both of those numbers, than what we traditionally have. So we have a combination of things. I can't speak to the dollars and things that y'all are discussing. I'll let John come back to that.
So if you-
But what we have is less drivers and buses than we've ever had before,
Right.
and needs that are significantly higher than we've ever had before. And what we're trying to do is figure out how to get our kids where they need to be to receive the services, not only that they deserve, but that they're required to have.
so let me just ask this question, because I don't understand. And again, I apologize for being lost. I usually feel better prepared for these conversations. Why are we educating homeless children in Loveland, transferring someplace else?
It's a law, McKinney-Vento, it's a requirement. If a child is
Continuity.
considered homeless, the
Okay.
last place they attended school, they are allowed to continue to attend there. And not only are they allowed to continue to attend there, we need to drive them here. We do split that cost with wherever they are currently staying. And I can tell you, it's not a significant distance. We have a couple that are in the Blue Ash area. We have one in the Milford area, without giving too much information about the families and what they're going through. But we do bear the burden of that. And it really is, to Reverend Eilert's point, a continuity piece.
And
Not the
is-
kiddo's fault that
we being
circumstances has
you
come
said
up.
We're sharing costs. Are we being reimbursed at some later?
Yeah, so basically, yes. So Mr. OC works
And
with
is that going
other
into the
districts.
requests that we're being asked to approve now?
that I
The
don't-
future reimbursement?
So logistically, we're talking about two different things. There is catastrophic cost reimbursement. There is that we have to apply for, and it's subject to us, our state share. But this line item, and the reason that I use a contingency, is it provides us a budgetary tool so that we don't have to keep going back to the county auditor and changing our numbers. That contingency, it can't be spent out of there. We reduce the amount.
And the problem is you now have to answer to us, and I don't have any idea what we're talking
Basically, I'm talking about a budgetary line item from the
about.
contingency
What it
account.
is. I'm just saying that I'd like more information in the future before I'm asked to do something.
So Rob, this is
Okay.
a case where we said when we talked about contingency during the pre-levy months,
Mhm.
that we wanted to have board control over this kind of
Exactly,
thing.
right.
This is what board control looks like.
That's
Okay.
a
so
very good point.
You're going to have to live with us on this. And I think what Eric is saying, if you need something right now to get by, he's saying, if I correct me, he's saying, we'll let you have money to get by, but we want to understand, not the head count so much, but we want to understand the flow of the dollars better than we do right now.
I understand.
And I-
We're saying that we cannot, so go back to my higher ed experience, we would simply change our spending plan for the year to account for the, you're saying we can't simply adjust our spending plan because that needs.
Well, normally I would on a contingency. Board asked to have the authority to make that decision. Normally, I wouldn't even be having this conversation. I would have it there for that purpose. That's what we're talking about
Something
now.
that
So if we,
began to explain it to me a little bit more, something to the effect of, last year, this kind of transportation that we had to provide, that we were providing, was maybe costing 13,000 a month, and this year it's costing 35,000 a month. So I understand it gets complicated by saying the transportation budget is different because we have fewer bus drivers, but they're driving more hours. So it's not an apples to apples comparison. That part of the budget cost. But this part of the budget, which we have to provide, has doubled in cost. And so you're asking to cover, or tripled,
Tripled.
yes.
If I may, I have a spreadsheet that lists children, which I will zero their names out, but lists where they're going, lists how much it costs per student to do. I will say I was not prepared for this discussion, so I would be glad to bring it back to you. If we would just provide money to get to the end of December.
How much do you need for that?
Probably 50,000.
Out of the contingency.
Yes.
That'll take care of it for now.
Am I hearing though from the board that the primary concern is an analysis of our transportation budget? And if we can cover a portion of this expense out of our transportation budget, so we're not using more of the contingency, is that
Yeah,
what
I
you
mean,
were
if
expressing?
you're talking about me right now,
Right.
but my viewpoint would just be normal kind of financial controls
Right.
over our expenditures. I want to understand when we have something extraordinary to this extent, that we feel it's necessary to dip into this contingency fund that we previously agreed to establish controls over. And I think if we're going to release money from the contingency, we all ought to feel comfortable about why, where it's going, what alternatives have been looked at, et cetera.
Right, but in terms of what we're directing, I guess I'm not feeling a need to know how many kids and all of that.
Yeah, I'm not
I feel like
either.
What I just heard was enough for that piece. If I need additional information, it's under an analysis of their transportation fund, where that's going to be relative to what the
Right.
budget was, and if some of this cost could be covered.
Right. I mean, the kids that we're serving in this domain, I mean, this is something we don't have a choice about. This is what public schools do. So we have to do this. I trust the district, the administration, to figure out what we have to do and to do it the best way. I want to understand the money.
I would agree with that we don't need a list of numbers of kids, that would come out in the budget, that you would have a budget that says we have this much for bus drivers, we have this much for special transportation, you know.
And in a further conversation, our special transportation has gone up significantly because we're providing services to twice as many children as we did last year. We're paying 3 times as much for those services, and we don't have any leeway in our system as we had before. And I want to be really clear. I totally trust you guys to make these decisions, and I'm very sorry that we're in the position that we have to have this conversation. But if I'm going to be responsible for deciding what money is being spent out of that contingency, I need to make sure that we've explored all the other options and understand what we can do so this does not become a permanent increase in our budget.
Not a problem. I'd be glad to. I'll bring you all the information at the next.
And if you.
So have we determined what we need for this evening?
$50,000.
Have we, that's what I'm asking, have we?
Make a motion to.
Well, wait a second. I want to hear from the people who need the money, that 50,000 is, because they just were kind of pushed to a number, and I
So
hesitate.
we can have this conversation again December 10th.
We can have it, but I would prefer,
It'd be better, I think, if we gave them enough money to get them to.
Well, and that's what I mean.
Yes.
So we have another 6 weeks.
Yeah.
yes.
If you prefer to table it until we've had a discussion on the 10th and then bring it back to the table in January, we can accommodate. It's a logistical budgetary function. We're going to transport the children, we're going to pay our bills. And our book just has to balance this is a budgetary modification.
Okay.
Don't need the cash.
Yes.
Well, it's a budgetary modification. It's a fairly significant increase to our bottom line that was not in our budget.
I actually would prefer, unless the board disagrees, I won't do it till I hear some heads nod. But in that case, my preference would be to table this rather than just pick a number out of the air.
And you won't run out of money in the near future because we'll be able to spend the money that we would
Because
have spent.
Jesse's bringing us all the money. Oh, no, that's right.
Children.
Sorry.
Sounds good to me.
And we can also have a further discussion about how contingency works. I think there's misinterpretation of what it is and why it is, and it truly is more of a function of budgetary logistics to make sure that we're able to not have to continually make changes all over the place. So you move it from one place to another, then now you're, spending this one down, and this just keeps what we set sail with in place, and it is a tool mechanism for budgetary compliance.
Remember, you asked for it.
Talk about.
Actually, I think we asked.
We will also be able to come back and talk about the catastrophic a little bit better than we are right now, because there is money in potentially come back to the district. But
Next year.
Next year,
This is a catastrophic reimbursement.
to reimburse what we're doing this year,
All
I
right.
think
so
this is a,
To table this resolution.
potential.
it's a great example of two things, why you need a contingency, number one, and number two, since we did say the board needs to approve, it's a great example for us to make sure we provide the necessary information for that approval. So
Okay, so I moved to table, and Dr. Switchnow seconded to table. Very quiet. And so I think, unless there's objection or questions, we need to vote on that.
Very good. Dr. Lorenz?
Yes.
Dr. Schwetchnow?
Yes.
Mr. Gardy?
Yes.
Reverend Eilert?
Yes.
And Mrs. Washburn?
Motion
Thank you.
carried. The resolution is tabled. And guess where we are? I think, right?
Where's
Nothing,
Michelle? You need
nothing
her.
hidden on board docs. Okay. Now I have to have bones to pick with board docs. We need a motion to adjourn. Did I hear a motion from Mr. Doherty? Do I hear a second?
You do.
Reverend, why is everyone so quiet? All right, there's a motion to adjourn. I'm just going to ask for all those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned at 9:24.